Alright, so when I put up the review for, Owen put up the review for Infinity War that I did, somebody actually commented saying, hey, well, you know, it'd be crazy is if you did a versus with the entire MCU. And little did they know, by the time that happened, this was already planned to happen right around the time Infinity War was coming out on DVD. You just saw Infinity War for the first time last night, thanks to the digital release, so I'll be very interested to see what you have to say when that comes around. So, in the meantime, I figured we would just start with the whole, sort of like we did with the Bond, but the Bond video, but not quite as, but split up in a bit different way, because the original idea was to try to do it the way we did the Bond video, where we split it up into different categories. But then we both realized that that was getting pretty difficult. So you decided, why don't we just split it up by hero? So we'll talk about the Iron Man movies just as a whole, then Captain America, Thor, and so on until we get to the Avengers, and then that's just how we're going to do it. And then we'll do a top 5 of movies at the end of it. So, did you get that worked out?
I'm going to kind of wing it.
So, yeah, and before we get into it, in regards to just general thoughts about the series, obviously, it's amazing that it exists. Like this is just one of those things where it's like, and I feel like it sort of set a precedent in a way that it almost a negative precedent for anybody else that's going to try this. Because when Iron Man came out and then it was followed immediately by The Incredible Hulk, and we got like the iconic post-credit scene in Iron Man when, you know, Nick Fury talks about the Avenger Initiative and all that, and then they followed that up with Hulk, with the Stark scene at the end of that. I don't recall anybody saying, I don't remember any pessimism. Like, it was just all hype. Nobody was saying, oh, they're never going to get that far. Oh, people will get tired of it before then. And obviously we've seen how this happens, and it just keeps, this past 10 years, it just keeps going and going and getting bigger and bigger and more successful. And, like, anytime somebody tries this now, the very first thing you hear is pessimism. Whether it be the DC universe, when Universal tried to do the Monster Universe again with The Mummy, everybody just says it'll never work. It'll fail long before then. So, like I said, I don't know if you can chalk that up to Marvel, is why people just see this as such an accomplishment. It's like nobody else is going to do this. They can't, or they can try, and they can, you know, they might fumble a little bit. But as you can see, even DC is starting to do the whole, like with the Joker thing, where it's like, maybe if we just start doing standalone stuff, and we'll see what happens.
And what's crazy is, like you were saying, or like, it ended up proving true. I mean, Infinity War, I read the other day, is only the second non-James Cameron movie to cross the $2 billion mark. Obviously, the train's been rolling.
And were you watching the box office as it came in weekly? It happened so fast. It was, like, insane. Like, it was breaking, like, a new gigantic record, like, every weekend. And the thing also is that, I mentioned this a while back, like back when the first Guardians of the Galaxy was coming out, and it's obviously quite held up, and that is the fact that people often like to build up that superhero fatigue is either happening or is going to happen at some point. I don't really think that's the case with, I don't think Marvel's having that problem, at least in its universe.
No, but I think it's just because, for the most part, the movies in the series are pretty strong.
Yeah,
I mean, what's your weak point? Thor: The Dark World?
Yeah, some people like to say, like, critics and stuff like that are, like, bought by Disney or whatever, but it's like, when you say, like, because it does seem like, I noticed this when Ant-Man and the Wasp came out, and I was watching it, to where it was like, you just kind of go into these, the quality has just been so consistent, and when it's not been consistent, mostly that's because it exceeds it. It does seem like you just go into these sort of knowing you're going to like it.
And outside of that, I mean, for a series that's gone this long with this many movies, I mean, Bond has changed hands 5 times, and it's taken 40 years to get as many movies as there are in this. And with the exception of Terrence Howard and Edward Norton, everybody's the same.
I think one of the Warriors 3 was replaced in some way too, but I can't remember which was which. I think Zachary Levi wasn't in the first one, and he replaced the other dude. I think I'm not positive, but...
Well, major cast changes that you noticed was...
And Red Skull in Infinity War.
Yeah, but you can't tell the difference.
Yeah, I'm sure.
If you hadn't told me that, I wouldn't have known that.
Surely it's a known fact that we're going to go into spoilers, because surely anybody watching this has seen all the movies by now, and Infinity War's long since. I'm surprised you avoided as many spoilers as you did before you saw Infinity War last night.
It wasn't easy. It was not easy, especially being on Reddit and everybody posting memes related to things. Like, it was... But I didn't know what happened all the way up until the end.
But the other thing I think really makes them stand out, and I was talking about the fact that it's like, yeah, it seems kind of cheap to like go into a movie knowing you're going to like it, which means you're probably not going to be as critical of it as you would another movie or another series or whatever. But it does feel like when Harry Potter was out and when Lord of the Rings was out, you had like those big event movies, or like anytime Cameron puts a movie out. And there was like a while there where the event movies seemed to kind of die off. And now it feels like almost every single one of these is one, especially an Avengers one. Even a non-Avengers one that might as well be an Avengers one, like Civil War.
Yeah.
Where it's like, I still have to like put it in my brain that Civil War is not technically an Avengers movie.
It almost feels like that the Avengers movies are almost like bonus movies. Like, you get all these things to enjoy and all these characters that you like, and it's like, hey, just for fun, we're going to throw you something that has all of them. And you can see them all cohabitate.
And sometimes they even exceed that, though. Like, I know a lot of people, including me, kind of like to say that Civil War is a significantly better Avengers movie than Age of Ultron is. So yeah, that's kind of just the general look of it, I think. So do you want to?
It's definitely something that's kind of changed. It's a game changer. Nobody was doing this before, and nobody's been able to pull it off since. And you can just tell the work and the care that goes into it. None of them, even the ones that aren't as good, none of them feel half-assed.
Yeah.
Like, it feels like there was actual care and time put into them, and it shows. And the people that... It's nice to see that the people that have been involved have reaped the rewards of it, because it's... You can tell it's a product that was cared for. It's not just some shit that was slung together and was like, hey, let's try to make some money off this. The movies continue to be good and continue to exceed whatever came before it.
And obviously we'll get to go into this later, but even the ones that like the people consider like the lowest, like The Dark World, has its moments for sure.
Yeah.
So are we going to start doing the individuals now?
Well, you have to start with Iron Man, because if Iron Man came out and was a shitty movie, it would have train wrecked all of it. But I remember it came out when I was in college, and I remember the first day we went to see it, we liked it so much that the group that I went with, we just went back the next day and watched it again.
And then you called me and said, dude, like, yeah.
Yeah.
I hadn't intended on seeing it because I liked the trailers a lot. But the thing was we actually talked about this when we did the Nolan versus Burton video. It's insane to look back on the fact that this is what we've come to. But back in 2008, Iron Man was just everybody killing time until The Dark Knight.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's insane how Nolan's trilogy, while great and, you know, finished and complete, and we love it as much as we do, it feels like a long time ago.
Yeah.
It feels like like The Dark Knight Rises, that series ended 6 years ago. And yeah, obviously I'm not trying to compete or anything, because obviously they had two different intentions, but it's just insane to look at their status is back in 2008 and then what they are now. So. And
I remember when it came out, like, I remember seeing a trailer for Iron Man, and I didn't really know a lot about Iron Man.
Yeah, I don't think...
The only thing I knew was that he was an alcoholic, and that was just because I had a friend that just... Iron Man just happened to be his favorite character, and if it hadn't been for him, I would have had no clue who it was.
Yeah, because wasn't it considered... This is thrown around a lot, especially in this series, and it's sometimes a bit overblown, but, I mean, really, in regards to the first Iron Man, it kind of felt like a bit of a gamble, too. Because it was a character that, like, nobody really... Like, general audiences really didn't know about that much.
Yeah.
And Downey was, like, known pretty much... I mean, he had, like, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang by this point, which was starting to bring him back. But he was mainly known for his past.
And also, like, it was kind of a gamble, too, because Iron Man's could be a dick. Like, he's not always the most likable person. I mean, he does the right thing at the end of the day, but... You know, he's an asshole all the way to the end sometimes. But
they really do make that, like that's not going to be a problem, because so early on you see the absolute triumph that he went through to get to being Iron Man.
Yeah.
You know, building in a cave with a box of scraps. That whole
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we were just kind of, I didn't know if we were going to do individual moves or just kind of just bounce around or what.
Bounce around, we can.
Well, I do want to say, and we can come back to the first Iron Man or go to Iron Man 3 anytime, but I will just say that Iron Man 2 is another one. It's kind of like the Dark World, where when people are trying to think of where the worst has been in the MCU, fingers get pointed a lot at Iron Man 2 as well.
Yeah, but look at what it brought into. I mean, yeah, it might be considered a weak point, but we got War Machine and Black Widow out of it.
Yeah, I always, like, it never, I mean, obviously I know that, and if somebody were to ask me, I probably would remember, but I mean, when I watch Black Widow these days, and the Captain America movies and the Avengers movies, it just feels like so long ago, I keep forgetting that she started with Iron Man 2 in the movies.
Yeah.
So...
And it's funny because if you notice in like the later Avenger movies, like in the second one, he's so enthralled with her. Like you always had that trailer moment where he's like, "I want one" after she comes in, and then like now they don't even really interact with each other.
Yeah.
Like
well, she started on his side in Civil War, but then she like bitched out and became neutral. And then
it's kind of a harsh way to put it.
Well,
Bitched out.
Not because she's a woman, because it's... okay.
I know what you mean.
Good. You know, Jeremy Renner got in trouble for this, so we're gonna...
Yeah.
Well, the whole Age of Ultron press tour was like a disaster for everybody. Like, everybody was getting in trouble. I think, what did Jeremy Renner say? Like, she was a slut or something, but he said it so jokingly.
Yeah.
And then it was like a problem for like a month for him.
That's just it, too, with this series, is we keep getting bigger and bigger names involved.
Yeah.
So, like, it's not like a lot of series, they kind of phase out their names, and eventually it ends up in, like, straight to DVD land, and this one just keeps building.
Somebody that just won an Oscar is considered, I believe, a favorite character from Iron Man 2 as well, Justin Hammer.
Yeah.
But the thing was, I do remember a lot of disappointment in regards to the way Whiplash was handled, and I think that's where some of...
Yeah, because the trailer made him seem so badass, and he has that scene at the race... And then we don't really get another head-to-head moment.
Have you read about how jaded Mickey Rourke is about it too?
Yeah,
because I guess he was supposed to do a lot more.
Yeah.
But the thing was when I watched it back, it was like he's responsible for more than I remembered. Because people want him to be responsible for the destruction and stuff like that. But he is responsible for he spends the whole movie building Justin Hammer's army, so he is doing something. But he's not the big supervillain we were promised, which does suck.
Yeah.
Especially after he gets the badass escape sequence, too. Because you're like, oh man, what's this lead to? This is going to be awesome.
And Iron Man 3 kind of pulls that shit again with the Mandarin.
I don't mind the Mandarin twist so much. And I didn't I feel like I've come full circle now because Iron Man 3 was the first movie I ever reviewed on YouTube. So it's like full circle 5 years
Is
later.
it really?
Yeah.
Huh.
So the thing about it is... I don't know. Well, okay, here's actually, before we do anything into the Mandarin, I need to tell you something. Are you familiar with the one-shots? Okay. The one-shots are these things that, like, these little shorts that were in between some of the movies. They've really, like, gone off this. And I don't know why they aren't still, like, really prominent, because they had some really cool stuff in there. Because the first one-shot was about... it was to basically show the power of S.H.I.E.L.D. A lot of them are, like, Coulson-centric. Like, before... I think that's why the one-shots don't exist now, because Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. exists now. Yeah,
because Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. kind of serves as an in-betweener, because it always makes references to
but before we had Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., there were these little shorts called one-shots that were, like, special features on the DVDs. The first one was... there was, like, the higher power actually wanted Blonsky from Incredible Hulk to be the Avenger. And to pull him out of prison to do that. And it was S.H.I.E.L.D. that basically went in and said, you know, it should be Hulk and Blonsky should stay in prison. Then there was one where, just a really short, funny one, where when Coulson's on his way, the short is called A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to Thor's Hammer. And it's just Coulson driving out to Thor's hammer when we see him in Thor. But in between, he stopped at a convenience store and thwarted a robbery. Just really easily. And that's all it is. So sometimes there's little short things like there. But then there's one with... there's one that...
Coulson also comes from Iron Man.
Yeah. But then they also allude to something we would see later in Spider-Man Homecoming, where it was right after the Avengers, and Jesse Bradford and Lizzie Kaplan play a couple that finds like some of the alien weapons laying around and uses them to like commit crimes. And they eventually, he and Sitwell basically recruit them into S.H.I.E.L.D. Which of course what we learn later about Sitwell, it's always like the things he did, were they for a worse cause or not. But then there was one that was devoted to Peggy Carter, where Bradley Whitford played her boss, and she got to do a little bit. But then
they tried to give her own show, and it just didn't really take off.
Yeah. But then, come back around what I was talking to, the one that really stands out, and we're talking about what Iron Man 3 did with the Mandarin, and I don't think they've ever delivered on this since. It was one called All Hail the King, and it was Trevor Slattery, Ben Kingsley, in prison, and he's being interviewed by Scoot McNairy, and he's basically saying, you know, like, he's basically like this big celebrity in prison now, and like he has inmates that are like his fan club and all that. And so it turns out that Scoot McNairy is actually involved with like the 10 Rings, and the short ends with him telling Trevor Slattery, "Now I'm going to take you to the real Mandarin," and we never came back to that. And it was like, I feel like they were taking that somewhere that was going to make people a bit more happy, because everybody's pissed off at the idea of basically Killian just saying, "I'm the Mandarin," and leaving it at that. You know what one of the best parts about that short is, though? There's somebody else in the prison watching from a distance saying, like, why is he getting all the attention? It's Justin Hammer. So, yeah. So that was... But the thing...
It seems like they put all of the one-shots into either Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. or just post-credit scenes.
Yeah. But there is also... I do like the fact that the thing about it is when you look back at the Mandarin twist, the first thing that, I mean, I know people just flat out don't like it for what it does, because a lot of people loved what Kingsley was doing. Like when we saw the Kingsley scenes, people were like, holy shit, this is like exactly what we wanted. He's so threatening, he just does everything, he shoots people just instantly. The upstairs people are very noisy, hopefully it doesn't pick up too much. But the thing is that they actually pulled it off to the fact that it makes sense when you look back. Because we never see him outside of the TV screen. They try to throw you off to where we cut to him like in person, but there's nothing to allude to the fact that he's not just being controlled by somebody else. So it's like, thought actually went into pulling that twist off, regardless of how, what the fuck it might seem. And I always appreciated that. Not to mention, honestly, I think Trevor Slattery is just hilarious. Like, a little bit of it was on last night, and one of my favorite scenes, maybe in the whole cinematic universe, is when Tony's, like, interrogating him about it, and he's explaining it to him, and then he just falls asleep. And Tony's just like, did you just nod off? one of my favorites is when he's talking about, he's afraid that he's going to get taken in. And just the way Ben Kingsley says, if you're going to take me in, there's some people I'd like to roll on. You see, I don't mind it really. but I do absolutely, when we see what Ben Kingsley could have done. And it's really a testament to Kingsley's performance, too, that he plays both of these. Like, he plays the comedy relief, what the fuck twist that everybody hates, but he was also playing the Mandarin everybody wanted to see in the same movie. So, I do get it, but I'm okay with it, honestly. So there's that. Do you have anything to say about any more of these?
And they have really good scenes. I mean, I like the fight at the end of the first one between Iron Man and Ironmonger.
Yeah.
With Obadiah.
They're really good. Actually, what the Iron Man movies do really well that the Marvel Cinematic Universe struggles with is its climaxes. Like, when I watched Iron Man 2 back, I'd forgotten, like, how... I mean, it's not like a really big thrilling climax or anything, but it doesn't overdo it. It's not over long, which is a big problem in this universe. One
scene I really like too is, and it's not even the climax, is in Iron Man 3 when Tony's house gets destroyed.
Yeah,
that's some pretty intense shit going down.
We were near those filming locations too a couple years later. And the thing is because when you look at the climax of Iron Man 2, and you compare it to what we've been seeing lately, where everything is just a big war, there's like thousands of people just going at each other and stuff like that over and over and over again. But with Iron Man 2, you've got cool shit, like the whole flying sequence is great. and kind of changes it up a little bit. And then the really big moment when they get to be a team for really the first time. Because before this, they just fought each other, which was the first time we saw Cheadle in the suit. And not everybody's favorite scene. But then there's the moment when they're in like the park and we get the spinning around shot where they just take out the whole army. And you can say maybe that's boring because it's literally just them fighting robots, you know, what stakes are there? But I think it still works. And then of course, you know, Whiplash coming back one final time, even if it's for like 30 seconds, still at least he did have like, you know, because the thing is, that I also really liked. You talk about Ironmonger and then Whiplash. There's something what I really like about what Iron Man 3 did, and that was the way they depicted Tony having PTSD after the Avengers.
Yeah.
Because it's like, yeah, they're fighting all these things, and yeah, it's a world with Thor and Hulk in it or whatever. But the thing is before Tony was fighting aliens and flew through a wormhole with a nuke and blew up a mothership, he had only fought people that had other variations of his own suit.
Well, not only that, but he's human. He's just a guy.
So I actually really liked that angle. And it could seem like a lot of people thought they were half-assing it a little bit, and like he spent too much time out of the Iron Man suit. But it was about time he got humanized and humbled.
Yeah.
And that stands for the rest. Like, but a lot of people thought it kind of like sort of came from like, you know, it was a little too abrupt in Civil War. About the way Tony starts and where he ends up and on the side of the government he's on in Civil War. And it's like when you see, like, obviously they say what happened in Age of Ultron is what, you know, really turned him. That turn really started, like, his character started going through huge changes starting in Iron Man 3 following what happened in the Avengers.
Yeah,
I think
his house getting destroyed kind of humbled him too.
Yeah. And falling in love with Pepper. Yeah,
because he was like, he gave his phone number and he gave no fucks and then it destroyed it.
That's another thing that humanized him too, was how vengeful he got when Happy was put in a coma.
Yeah.
Like, that's where the whole sending the address came from. And actually made him that reckless actually shows you. And I guess you could say it's a plot contrivance, but I think it's actually really good for the character to really see him push that far for a character that we may not be, you know, always thinking about, like, Happy Hogan, but, I mean, when it happens, it's like, yeah, Happy's, like, always been there. Even in Iron Man 3, we see from the beginning, like, at least since the 1999 era, Happy's been around.
Yeah.
And we see Happy try to save him. He, like, dives on him and shit.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I just think all of that actually really adds up.
Yeah. And you know these movies hold up because you had to have a good pace to start with or you never would have got this far.
And it's also... I like the way that... obviously, she, like, seems to really be, you know, has ups and downs in regards to how she's handled in this series, but I really like what Iron Man 3 did with Pepper. Like, she is so important in Iron Man 3. She gets to wear the suit. She gets to save his life. We think she's dead for a minute. She gets to kill the villain. She's now... the whole extremist thing... I do think they really lamed that down with, I guess, you know, in general, making her kill the villain, it could be considered lame, but that was really violent line.
But have you noticed, too, in the series that ever since that happened, Pepper is very hands-off with the whole thing? It's like, when she did that, she was like, this is as far as I care to go with this.
Yeah.
Like in Infinity War, like, they're walking through the park and he shows up and she's just like, go, see ya. I'll catch you later. I don't want nothing to do with this shit.
I got a question. What do you think of Don Cheadle as Rhodes?
I think Don Cheadle's fine. I don't have an issue with him.
I, too, think Don Cheadle's fine as Rhodes. But there's one problem, and it's not Don Cheadle's fault. Maybe I'm alone in this, too. But here's the thing. Don Cheadle can also be very, very funny, whether it be in a funny movie or in real life, like in interviews and stuff. He can be a really funny dude. So I put this up to the writing entirely. Rhodes' one-liners fucking suck. Every single one of them. Every single one of them for me falls flat. Especially in Iron Man 2. And it's like, of course I don't know, like, Justin Theroux is credited for writing Iron Man 2. But the thing is, you can never quite tell what's the studio in these movies and what's the writing. So I don't know who to point the finger at. It could have been improv. Maybe I am blaming Don Cheadle. But stuff like Get a Roof, It's Called Being a Badass, just none of them work for me. And Iron Man 3, when he answers the phone, I don't care. I thought Terrence Howard handled that a lot better. Rhodes is hilarious in Iron Man. So, especially the even when his deliveries, like, even coming from him, they're not meant to be comedic. Still, they work. Like the when they're covering up him flying around with the training exercise. Just that cut of Terrence Howard saying it was a training exercise is hilarious.
Yeah.
So, yes, I was looking to see if there was anything else I needed to say. Oh, yeah, I did like a bit of foreshadowing that's in Iron Man 2 that I almost forgot about. It's one line, but I liked how crucial it ended up being. Because when you fast forward to the Avengers, we learn that Coulson is a big Captain America fanboy. And he's got the trading cards, and they, like, actually use that to, like, Nick Fury says, like, here, use this as your thing. And it's the bloody cards that make everybody go, aww. I love that that is alluded. His fanboyism of Captain America is alluded to with one line in Iron Man 2, and that's when he sees the shield and he just says, "Do you know what this is?" And then we never hear about that again. And then it makes total sense 2 years later when we learn he's a big Captain America fanboy.
And that's what helps. There's like, with this, there was no rushing. This has been a slow build for a very long time, and it started here, like. It all started here.
And it's one of those cases where it's so seamless, you can't tell what they had planned and what was just a happy accident.
Yeah.
Also, as far as action scenes go, you know what's amazing? Like, I mean, these movies have, like, done very well in the action department, but one just, like, actually really stands out. The plane scene in Iron Man 3, when everybody falls out of Air Force One and they have to do the Barrel of Monkeys thing.
Oh, yeah.
That's an incredible action sequence. So, yes, as we've learned, whether it be Mission Impossible Fallout or Moonraker, it's like, I'm all about mid-air action sequences, so, and that's another really great one. So, so yeah, does that pretty much sum up the whole Iron Man saga by itself?
I would say so. I feel like that puts the kibosh on that.
Alright, so let's go on to something a bit more, I guess, patriotic.
I guess so.
First off, I wasn't quite sure how to take the casting of Chris Evans, because I know he'd had like Scott Pilgrim and stuff like that. But what's the first thing you usually think of when you think of Chris Evans?
Not another teen movie.
Of course.
He'll never be able to live it down.
But yeah, there has been something he's been able to do throughout the whole thing where Steve could be irritating with how, like, perfect he is. With kind of like the way Tony sees him by Civil War.
Yeah.
That could be the way, like, most people see him. But that earnestness actually really comes through. I think his performance is in large part to that. How do you feel about him just in general?
I like Cap. I think Cap is always focused on doing the right thing. And it can be irritating when you may have to take an alternate route that may not be the best thing, and he's just like, no, I'm going to do the right thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's good. I feel like Cap and Tony's relationship is a lot like Batman and Superman's is in the comics, where Cap is just seen as this Boy Scout, and Tony doesn't think he has the edge to do what he needs to do. Which is funny, because when you get to Civil War, Cap turns that on its ear. Tony's like, just join us, and Cap's like, nope, not doing that. He's like, fuck that noise.
And Cap's the one that actually ends up being the criminal because of it.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough.
Yeah, it's an interesting role reversal.
So, with that said, and we talked about how perfect Steve is, and how, you know, earnest and all that, you know what stands out to me in a really interesting way? How brutal it is when Steve's in a fight. The fight scenes that he has in these movies are like, they hit hard.
Yeah.
That shield is like unrelenting in itself, but even when he's just like in hand to hand, he can fuck dudes up.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really interesting contrast to the way that he's all just the way he approaches things in general.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when we see the whole, arc of him where he was just the tiny dude backed into the corner with the bullies and willing to fight, but he couldn't. And to see what he is now is really interesting. And, like, for instance, the first glimpse I feel like we really get of it is in, obviously, the first movie. And it's one of my favorite action scenes in the series, and that's not when they're on the bikes and it's like a chase through the forest, but what comes right after that, like just before they get taken in by Hydra, and that's when that fight breaks out. Right there. It's like it's short, but like I said, just the sound of whenever he hits somebody is so brutal, and then that comes forth even more in the Winter, probably the most in Winter Soldier than any of these three. Because the action in the Winter Soldier is like insane, like off the rails.
Dude,
insane.
the Winter Soldier is just awesome.
And it feels, for a long time, it feels non-stop. And you're probably going to hear this a lot, the whole, one of my favorite action scenes in the series, but I mean it for real this time. Like, absolutely positively, if I had to make, like, a top 3 action scenes in this entire universe, the Nick Fury chase in the Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
I'm just all about that. and that's also, I think, because, I'm just kind of always hoping for more Nick Fury. Just like anytime I walk into one of these. In the Winter Soldier, we got a really nice dose of them. They do the bullshit normal, hey, he might be dead thing. And this was back.
You got a lot of them in Iron Man too.
Yeah. But there's also something here to where it's like, oh shit, where was I going with that? Oh, he does do the like, oh no, he might be dead thing. But the thing is this was before they had pulled that card a million times over. So I remember when the Winter Soldier came out, I was mostly convinced he actually was dead for a while there. But then obviously when he comes back, it's like, well, yeah, of course. It's like, why did I think otherwise? But yeah, though it just feels like nonstop for a while because you've got, I think the elevator scene is not that far away from that.
Yeah.
And you've got him chasing Bucky and that stuff. And it just feels for a long time like it's this non-stop action movie, and all these action scenes are played out so... Like, this was not exactly... I remember it, like, really exceeding quite what you expected, especially after the first movie. But it's able to get... It's good for his character, too.
Yeah, because the first Captain America, I mean, it's fine. It feels really out of place, I guess, because of the timeline it takes place in. But it's cool how it's still connected. Like, even though it was years and years and years before, it's still connected. And it just feels like such a different vibe, because the first one feels like one of those like classic war movies. And then you get to Winter Soldier, and I think I told you this after I saw it, it feels like a 70s, like, political thriller
like
almost.
3 Days of the Condor kind of thing, which is surely, like, the whole reason behind the casting of Robert Redford as well. But the thing also is, talking about going from the first Avenger to the Winter Soldier, what's really interesting, obviously the Avengers was in between them, but the thing is Steve is so busy in the Avengers that the Winter Soldier is when we really get to see him, like, adapting to what's happened and the jump in time, which I find really interesting. Like, he has, like, such a tragic love story. That just kind of happens to be in the middle of these big superhero movies that you don't really expect to be so, to use the word again, tragic. But then they also make it kind of funny, like when Sam Wilson's giving him, like, recommendations for what to do to catch up on time. So my understanding, in different countries that list is different.
Oh.
But yeah. And obviously, another thing that the Winter Soldier does is it pretty much sends everything, like, it's sort of like, I mean, I hate to use the example everybody uses, but I mean, the Empire Strikes Back ending, where just everything goes to shit. Whether it be, like, everybody's in damn Hydra, the shield, like, goes down, Nick Fury has to disappear. And then there's the whole thing, like, even characters that were, like, just small characters you didn't know you cared about. Like, I mentioned Sitwell earlier. Civil is just this really consistent dude in S.H.I.E.L.D. We saw him in Thor a few times. He was on the show a few times. He's in the one-shots. And not only is he Hydra, he gets a really violent end in this during another great action scene. And the big one, the one that I'm really disappointed about, and I know there's nothing more tragic than a real-life death. I'm not trying to say that this is a bigger deal, but God, I really wish we had some more on the last time we saw Gary Shandling. He did the Hail Hydra thing, and that was a big reveal.
Yeah.
And now,
because then it had crawled into the government.
But unfortunately, we can't do anything with that character now, which is unfortunate. But
we'll probably see it play out in real life before too long. But
oh God, let's not go there. We're on the internet. So yeah, go ahead.
But I was just gonna say, you and I talked about this before. The thing that works for the Captain America movies too is it's like Iron Man established everyone, because most of the characters got their start in the Iron Man movies. Captain America advances the story. Thor's there just to show you what they can do with a big effects budget. And the Avengers movies are the payoffs. Like, does that make sense? Because, I mean, look at the stories that's been advanced. If you look at the first Captain America, the Tesseract, which is going to become... the payoff's going to come in the first Avengers. In the second one, you have the story in motion with Winter Soldier and S.H.I.E.L.D. going down, and what do we do without S.H.I.E.L.D., and since Hydra's taken over. And then Civil War, it breaks up the whole group. The Captain America movies, to me, are the most interesting because they're the ones that I feel like push the story forward.
And which makes it make even more sense that he's the first Avenger.
Yeah. Yeah, everything... If Captain America's involved, shit's going down. And that's stayed consistent through Infinity War. He was in Infinity War, shit went down. Like, if Cap's around, you know something important's going to happen.
And speaking of Civil War, can we just gush about Civil War for a little while?
Go for it.
Because, as I said before, it's basically another Avengers movie. And it's one that even surpasses the Avengers movie that came before it, I think. I think a lot of people think.
Yeah, because the only ones you're missing is Thor and Hulk. They're explained in Ragnarok, so there you go.
Yeah. And there's also the really interesting thing that Civil War does, and seamlessly at that, is you look at everything. It's able to take so many things and combine them and make them one whole that it's crazy. Because Civil War could have only had one job. Civil War gave itself two jobs. Two big, huge, enormous jobs. And did them perfectly. It had to be a direct sequel to The Winter Soldier, and it had to be a direct sequel to Age of Ultron. And it's both. And that is insane to me. And the fact that they're able to do that and make it fuse together in what ultimately turns into one story. And that is just... I can't even imagine where the ideas even begin to put that together. And to be able
And you have to introduce new characters.
Yeah, like Black Panther.
Yeah.
And then bring Spider-Man. And then somehow work, Ant-Man back into it. And nothing feels bloated. Nothing feels forced in. They even got Hawkeye in here to do some stuff, which is apparently very hard to do in the writing room. Poor Hawkeye. And yeah, and after we've just had a crucial character like Vision introduced, it was Civil War's job to carry on with that. Because he's
Scarlet Witch.
Yeah, because he's so crucial in Age of Ultron, but he had just been created. So they had to carry on that too somehow. It is a little lame that he just sits around cooking, but
But I mean, it's better that than force him into a story he doesn't need to be in.
Yeah, and he does get to come in later, of course. So, and we do kind of somewhat see the whole. I was saying before that I do think the him and Wanda thing probably works a little better than the Banner Natasha thing, because Civil War kind of starts it a little bit with the cooking scenes where he has to watch over her. So, and the whole idea of that's part of his evolution.
Yeah,
makes interesting sense.
And then you get the favor returned in Infinity War.
Yeah. In a big way. Like, it adds a lot more emotion than you'd ever think. Certainly more emotion than Banner and Natasha brought out yet. So, we're not even at Age of Ultron yet, and I'm already bashing that subplot. So what were you saying? You were getting ready to say something. I mean...
I don't remember what it was.
Okay, because I got one.
Okay.
There's another criticism that's actually thrown at this movie. Me and you always thought it was great, but I only heard, like, in the past, year or so that I guess it's been a popular criticism of the movie. And I can't disagree more. Because we were talking about if there's one way the MCU really needs to clean itself up, it's when we get to its climaxes.
Yeah.
We're just getting a lot of the same stuff, a lot of the same wars.
Mm-hmm.
Infinity War makes sense because it's literally a war.
Mm-hmm.
But...
And you gotta have good villains for that, and that's one area that Marvel's fallen kind of short, is their villains aren't as strong.
And so it's almost like Civil War intentionally didn't do that. Like, it intentionally said, hey, this climax that you're always expecting in these, we're just not going to do that. Because the criticism I keep hearing is, like, say you're comparing it to the Avengers movies. Might as well at this point. So you've got Loki, and you've got all the aliens, you've got the wormhole and all that, you've got this whole thing on New York. And then you got Age of Ultron, where Ultron's got this whole thing, and he had an age. He made a city float. And it's like, what's the threat in Civil War? Daniel Bruhl. By himself. I think that's awesome. And
not only that, but the fact that it's billed as Civil War, so if you look at it as the Civil War itself as the main plot point, you had your climax at the airport earlier in the movie.
That's amazing too, is in any other movie whatsoever, the airport would have been the climax.
Yeah.
There's still almost an hour left after the airport.
Yeah.
And the thing is...
Hell, they might even have the climax at the airport and then they would split it into 2 movies.
But this is the genius thing. This is where my love for Civil War really takes off. Because it does exactly what it needs to. And I can even imagine them going in the direction that looked like they were going to go. And when I reviewed it, I probably would have been saying, oh, they should have done this. But what I would have said then, like, they should have done this, is what they actually did. Because they're like, oh, he's got all his super soldiers, he's got them all in these tanks, they're all going to go. And it's like, okay, we know where this is going. It's going to be like, basically like Age of Ultron's climax, only it'll be super soldiers. They show up, they're all dead. And the climax of the whole movie is Cap and Bucky versus Iron Man. That's the climax. That is perfect. That is the most perfect thing they could have done. And we get the airport scene as a bonus. You thought this was the climax, didn't you? Okay, sort of thing. So we got faked out twice with climaxes. We got the one we kind of didn't really want with all the super soldiers. Maybe some people did. Maybe some people wanted a big old thing. But I'm just so tired of the big old thing at this point. I thought this was the absolute best way to go, especially since that's the whole jumping off point is Captain America versus Iron Man. That's what we're promised.
That's what's on the cover.
And good God, believe it or not, we actually get it for once.
And there's nothing held back. Like, there's no, like... the fight doesn't end on good terms. Like, it's not like at the end they're like, oh, we're I mean, that happens later. But when they leave the fight, I mean, it's...
I love when he makes Cap put the shield down, saying, you don't deserve it, my father made that. That's deep shit. That's a deep cut.
Yeah.
It actually pisses Tony off that his dad used to brag that he knew Captain America.
Yeah, and it just continues to further humanize Tony. He becomes this kind of resentful person.
And then it makes you, the whole thing where it's like, once again, we've kind of been building up because of the whole distance between him and Howard, which we started seeing a lot in Iron Man 2. And there was even that moment when he said, like, when he, like, he's watching, like, the whole movie, and then he says, like, Tony, I'm leaving all this stuff to you, and all that. And it's a touching moment. But there's still that distance there, and then we don't expect how much that's going to come back when they do the brilliant thing of the movie starting with a car wreck that Bucky causes, and then takes the shit. And we don't think that car wreck has anything to do with anything, just that he got the shit at the end. And then just the big way all of this adds up and comes together is just, yeah. And then a lot of people love pointing out, too, it's been, like, all about his dad and being, good enough for that and feeling neglected by him and basically trying to become not just what he was, but even better and stuff like that. But when he goes to kill Bucky, he says he killed my mom. And we didn't really... The only thing we've really gotten about her... Like, Hope Davis is, like, only in Civil War, isn't she? Like, that's the only time we've seen her. And there's just that one moment when they're saying goodbye, and he's... We don't know exactly how that scene went because he says that that's what he wished had happened. So that just kind of throws something in his character. It may seem very last minute, but it is something that makes you go, like... It's something about the character that we didn't know before that we feel like is something else that's driving him, which was just really interesting. But just throwing one line in there like that, and most people may just like say, "Well, yeah, of course, you know, he killed his parents. That's what they're mad." But then he singled out his mother. It's like there's something there that we don't quite have yet, but that we know is in there. So that's just really good character work too, and not. I think just something thrown in.
And it says something about the progression of the movies, too, because, I mean, we're this far in, and there's still... And we've been hanging out with Iron Man since 2008, and there's still stuff we're learning. And it doesn't feel like it's stuff that's just thrown in. It feels like you don't know this because it's not time for you to know this. It's not ready to pay off. Like, it's like they hold it for a time that it's going to matter.
And talking about them introducing the other characters, yes, we can thank Civil War forever for introducing us to Black Panther. I know everybody came out of Civil War just going on and on and on and on and on about Tom Holland. And I get it, you know, but I mean, he didn't make, like, some of it I felt was a little the Empire Strikes Back joke I never cared for. I like that he uses movie references to save himself, like he did with Ebony Maw, too, with Aliens. But it's, I don't know, I think that's... Yeah. Actually, there's something a little bit there, but it's something I have more to say about Age of Ultron, so I'll wait for that to come back around. But I mean, yeah, the Black Panther stuff, is why I was so hyped when the movie came out, because just those little tastes we got of him in this, whether it be the chase with Bucky, or the when he's on the at the end when he's confronting Zemo. And it's like, and just the suit and all that stuff, the way he runs and all that. Because I didn't know jack shit about Black Panther before I saw Civil War.
No, and that's another job that Civil War had. Civil War had it easy in introducing Spider-Man because Spider-Man's so popular. They could have just said, "We're going to make a Spider-Man movie," and be like, "Okay, we'll be there." But Black Panther, you really had to build up and make people excited for.
And it managed to find a way to somehow pull Wakanda into it. Obviously, that had been alluded to in Age of Ultron, but. To like actually,
Wakanda?
Yeah. But we're introduced to like the king and all that, and the fact that we'll go into this more with Black Panther later. But it's like, if you were to make a standalone Black Panther movie before Civil War, the entire first half hour of that movie is covered in Civil War.
Yeah.
And so that's really great. And just his line to Zemo when he stops Zemo from killing himself. He says, "The living are not through with you yet." It's like, this is how can you not get hyped for this going? So yes, any more gushing about Civil War?
I mean, it's just... Civil War is one of those movies that if you're going to have a movie that has a lot of characters in it, especially that are used to carrying their own weight in their own movie, it's kind of a blueprint for how to do it. Because, I mean, if you look at all the major characters, most of them have carried their own movie. Even Ant-Man. Black Panther's carried his now, and Captain Iron Man carried theirs, and there's very few characters in Civil War that participate that are just side characters. I mean, Black Widow, and it's a side character, but she's a side character in so many of them.
Yeah, like I said, she's the one that's, I called it bitching out earlier, but we'll say she's complex, because she starts off on one side, but then it's like... But you can tell that she has that back and forth because we obviously first saw her in Iron Man 2, so we associate her with Tony Stark. But then she had the major role. She was like the second lead character in Winter Soldier. Yeah. Like they're like a team in that movie basically. So it's like then you get, like I said, you get so used to her with Cap, you almost forget that she came from Iron Man 2.
It's funny because she has a connection to all three sides because. She had her first mission in the story that we've seen with Tony, so she kind of wants to side with him. And then, like you said, she's a team with Captain America and Winter Soldier, and she wants to side with him. Well, then she has this connection with Banner, and Banner just gives no shits. Like, he doesn't take a side. He's gone. After Age of Ultron, he's just like, I'm out. See ya. So it's funny that she's got a hand in each approach. And it kind of justifies why she's complex and why she changes her mind. It kind of justifies it for her.
So is that Captain America?
I would say that pretty well covers Captain America.
Alright, it's time to get a little out of this world, if you will. Sorry.
You've been watching too much Roadie.
Oh god. Do not compare me to Rhodes and his stupid one-liners.
Oh, we only have 2 here.
Yeah, I don't have the Dark World. Are you surprised?
It just drives home the first one.
So, but we are going to talk about all 3, sort of, as a whole here, just as we've done. So, do you have anything to start off right away with Thor, or...?
I think Thor is really fun. There's a lot of fun moments in Thor. Thor feels different because it just feels like a whole different...
What is it about the alien-themed ones and the space-themed ones that really brings out the comedy side in this universe?
Honestly, if I had to guess, I would say it's because there's so much to grasp. Because they have to introduce all these worlds, like in Guardians, and with this, like with Thor, like the things I remember about the Thor movies are funny. Like I love the little bickering in Ragnarok between Thor and Hulk, who talks like a toddler. And in the first one, we just saw a gif of it the other night. I love when he drinks the drink in the restaurant and he just slams it down and he's like, "I'll have another." Like he just treats it like he's in his own world.
The whole fish out of water thing, which is such a classic approach to comedy, and it's so interesting that that's the approach they took to Thor, even though it makes sense.
Yeah, it does, and it makes him a fun character because Thor is one of those characters to me that if he didn't have any comedy to him, I feel like he would be very boring. Because he's just, I'm God of Thunder, I kill everything.
Yeah, because it's the scenes on Earth where the movie really takes off. The Asgard scenes look nice, like visually they look really good, but it feels like it really kicks into gear once he's on Earth.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like it does feel like kind of a tease because we do start with the whole Earth thing, and it's like when he comes down, and then we go like all the way back, and then we go back to him on Asgard before this happened, and it's like you do get the sense of like. Where the movie started, should that have been where it started? Like do like an opening credit sequence or something. Like there's a movie that actually does that really well in this series that I will get to, but in the meantime, yeah. But you were talking about Captain America being the progressive one here in regards to story. But I often tend to kind of forget how crucial Thor is to bringing aliens into the story. Because that's what brings us to Thanos.
Yeah.
With starting with Loki going all the way that he does.
Yeah, Loki's kind of the catalyst.
And this whole idea that we talk about like weak Marvel villains and stuff like that, that's what like the universe is known for a lot. And you've got Colin Feore playing the main villain in this. But he becomes such an afterthought when Loki starts taking over. You almost forget he's in the movie, and he was like the main villain up to this point. But then once Loki takes over, would you agree that Loki is like a massive reason that like Thor's high points? A lot of them involve Loki.
Yeah.
Because what I really love about this is when Thor came out, Tom Hiddleston was having a really great year, and I think nobody knew who he was before this. Because he had done War Horse and Midnight in Paris the same year. And it was like we were slowly getting to know exactly who he was. Because like when Thor came out, it's like, oh yeah, he was F. Scott Fitzgerald in Midnight in Paris. And then when War Horse came out, it's like, oh yeah, that's the guy that played Loki. But the thing is that even though he just kind of seemed to suddenly appear, he seemed to really take... He and Hopkins both are what I think makes the first Thor work in a lot of ways. Because we talk about the comedy and the silliness of it and the fact that it's aliens and all that and the fish out of water thing and all that. But when you go back to Asgard and you see what Loki and Odin are doing, it's like Tom Hiddleston and Anthony Hopkins are doing Shakespeare to each other. Like with the same kind of commitment. It makes perfect sense with Kenneth Branagh directing them.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, and
which is a really interesting nugget in itself. Kenneth Branagh directs the first Thor.
But then, like I said, there doesn't seem to be too much of a contrast when we see what's going on Earth, going on with this as well. And it really builds up Loki's character because we know how crucial that's going to be. Anthony Hopkins especially is like so committed to playing Odin, particularly in this movie. Obviously, that role kind of died down a little bit, quite literally, as the series went on. But just his commitment to it too, like the way he says "silence" really gets me too. So yeah, is that? I mean, there are plenty more things I have to say about Thor. Do you have any more? Like the first movie.
I like. Oh shit.
Do you need help?
Selvig. His name.
Stellan Skarsgård.
Yes, thank you. For some reason, I couldn't want to say Bill. But no, Selvig he's a good character, and he even plays a part. Like, he gets the post-credit scene where he's the one dealing with the Tesseract.
You know what scene with Selvig I really love? That really sets up, like, Odin and Thor and Loki and all them, is when he's, like, learning the stories and he's, like, hearing Thor talk, and everybody's just like, oh, yeah, he's insane, okay? Even though we know he came down, still, this is all, you know. And Selvig gets, like, super serious and says, those stories he's talking about are the stuff that I, like, grew up hearing. They're, like, you know, those myths. And he's just, like, really blown away by that, even from a scientist's perspective. I always really like that.
He's a nice little addition that kind of gets lost in the shuffle sometimes.
Yeah.
But, I mean, he plays a key role in the first Avengers, too.
Yeah.
So, like, I like him. I feel like Thor is the... And I hate to pick on Thor, especially in this way, but I feel like Natalie Portman is almost our first pointless character we've come across.
Oh, you should ask people, like, comic book fans and all that, about Kat Dennings. Nobody likes her. She's like that one side character where it's like, yeah, these movies are supposed to be funny, but I guess a lot of people feel about Kat Dennings' lines the way I feel about Rhodes' lines.
Oh, okay.
So, there's that.
Well, I think also is the way that Thor's written and the way the comedy's, you don't really need Kat Dennings to be there to tell jokes. Thor's funny on his own. Like, the situations he gets in and the way he handles it is funny.
There is a scene in Thor that is so funny to me. Thor's not in it. Heimdall says it. And it is so funny to me that every time I watch Thor, if I'm watching Thor by myself, I'll rewind it and watch it 3 times before I move on. And it's when he's talking to the Warriors 3, and they're talking about how they're going to go down and they're going to save Thor, despite Loki. And he's, obviously it's Heimdall's job to stand there and stand guard. And so he's saying, like, so you're meaning to tell me that you're going to defy Loki, you're going to commit treason, you're going to break oath to get Thor back. And they're like, yes. He's like, good. And he just walks away. It's like, I watched that shit 3 times. Just the way he says good and just walks away. And then they like watch it all and go, he's complicated.
And I like how, like, in Ragnarok it kind of pays off that he's this badass.
Yeah.
Because, like, in the first Thor stuff, he's kind of just the gatekeeper.
Yeah, and even in Infinity War, it's like when he's the first to die, and he's a big major death. And it's like, we're coming back, I'm sorry. It's like, oh no, I'm never going to see the good again. I'm never going to see it the same way again. It's not going to be near as funny. And I've watched the first Thor again since Infinity War. Still funny as hell. It's a little tragic, but he is missed for sure. But yeah. So also, I do like that the way they handle some of the things, like some of the comic book aspects, like the fact that Thor's hammer becomes a tourist attraction, I think is a really good sort of detail. Or a way to take that or whatever. So, and of course we get more Coulson.
Yeah.
Which is always good. So, yeah. I don't know how much we have to say about the Dark World. So, but there are, as I said before, there are a few scenes that actually stand out that we might be forgetting about. One thing, like...
Well, it makes you think Loki died.
Again.
Yeah.
Loki fake dies in like every movie he's in. I think that's the exact reason Thanos says no resurrections this time when he kills him.
It's like he's talking to us, like he's done for real. Don't even think about it.
So, but even stuff that's not crucial, like the way they play with the portals, I always thought was really, because it's like it would be something scientists would do if they discovered that. They'd like throw their car keys and shit into it.
Yeah, you have to. Like, why wouldn't you?
But there's also, and it's a nice moment for them because obviously, as we saw, they can get some hate. Jane and Darcy can usually get some hate.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a nice moment to see them do their thing and actually, it's kind of nice. Yeah. And her date with Chris O'Dowd, because Chris O'Dowd makes everything better.
Yeah.
But
I think the biggest disappointment for the Dark World for me is that you got Chris Eccleston to be your villain and you really didn't do anything with it.
Yeah, we when our dad came into town with his 2 kids a month or so ago, whenever that was, a couple of months ago, I guess.
Where are they?
We were talking about, because Infinity War had just come out, and we were talking about it, and the kids were talking about it, and we were talking about the other movies, and we were talking about, I think The Dark World had come up, and then one of the kids said, mentioned the giant robot, and then I was like, that was actually the first movie, and they're like, well, what's the second movie? And I said, The Elves. And I could kind of see them trying to remember. Like, and it's like, yeah, The Dark World is just that kind of forgettable, unfortunately. But
it looks nice.
Yeah, but there is one segment I do like, and that is that it is sort of genuinely like, I mean, she's not a crucial character. We barely see her in the first movie. But when Rene Russo dies, it is like, it's something.
It feels like it matters.
But there's the funeral scene is beautiful. But then there's one scene also that really follows that makes it seem like it's even more of a big deal that I really love. And it says a lot about his character too. It's when Loki's in his cell and he's kind of talking about it, and I guess it's been a while since I saw it, but I'm going on a vague memory here, but he seems very nonchalant about it, more or less. But then he like does the thing where the room is just an illusion. When the illusion breaks, he's like ripped it apart in like anger and despair. And I thought that was really powerful.
Yeah. It's when he kind of starts playing with the holograms that he uses in Ragnarok and everything.
Yeah.
But it is kind of interesting that he still feels the need to put on that facade that everything's okay. And then he's fine with it.
So, does that pretty much bring us to Ragnarok?
Yeah.
Alright. I may have said this to you before, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure I said it when I did the video for it. I didn't care much for Ragnarok the first time I saw it, because I thought there was way too much comedy in it. Now, of course, Taika Waititi, the director, had done Hunt for the Wilder People before it, which is hilarious and was one of my top 10 movies of that year. But for some reason, I just thought it was an overkill in this. To where it was like it was like almost a comedy more than it was like sci-fi or action. It is just constant and like really over the top in a really big way. And that just sort of, I mean, I would laugh sometimes, but for the most part it just kind of was like, it's a little much. But then Infinity War happened, and Infinity War makes you completely reevaluate Ragnarok in a way, because what seemed like way too light, way too big in comedy and stuff like that, there's like a whole tragedy surrounding Ragnarok now, because we know what immediately follows it, and it's like it was intentionally a way to like give audiences one last fun go before shit got real.
Yeah, it feels like like just like you said, it feels like it's like, you know, we're gonna give you this because the next shit's gonna hurt.
And and I noticed this when I watched it back too after I'd seen Infinity War, is when you watch Ragnarok and you see the mid-credit scene, and they're like, we're going to Earth, everything's gonna be okay, nothing's gonna stand in our way, and then the giant ship appears, and they have those looks on their faces like, holy shit, and then it cuts, and we're like, oh, that's a setup, we're gonna see what's gonna happen there. But when you see where Infinity War starts, that scene is so dramatic.
It's just bodies. And it's like, and it makes it feel like it's really a gut punch to Thor, because everything he just fought for in the last 10 minutes of Ragnarok was just completely undone.
I actually heard that pissed some people off, because it like totally like waters down the whole climax of Ragnarok.
Yeah.
When it itself by itself had its own meaning, and then it's just like, what was it for?
Yeah. But I think that also helps because I think that's what drives Thor in Infinity War.
Yeah. To where it's like he just like there is nothing.
It's a rough couple of movies
But
there in a row.
But what's interesting though is they still use it actually effectively in a comedic way, where he's talking to Rocket and Star-Lord about everything that's happened to him, and it's like when we've seen it, it's been tragedy after tragedy after tragedy, and scenes that are played seriously. But then there's just something so darkly comedic about it, the way he's relaying it all back. And it's like, yeah, lost my brother, I lost my father, and Rocket's like, well, surely you got a mom, don't you? Nope. Not anymore.
And then he's like, I think he asks about best friend or something like that.
Yeah, Heimdall gets brought up. And then even in Ragnarok, it's like, well, my father died, and my sister I didn't know about came back, and she's going to destroy the whole planet, and I lost my hammer. Actually, that's just been in the last 2 days. That's just within the confines of the movie.
Yeah, he has a rough couple movies. Like it's like the writers of the series just all of a sudden got really pissed off at Thor. And was like...
So it's like it makes sense. The comparison I made before was watching Ragnarok immediately followed by Infinity War is like watching Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone and jumping immediately to Deathly Hallows 2.
Yeah.
With nothing in between.
Yeah.
So I do appreciate it more from that outlook. So there is that. And of course, even when it gets real, like, way into the meta stuff, way too self-referential, like the play they put on that Loki puts on to praise himself when he's posing as Odin. And it was embarrassingly long before I remembered that. I don't know if surely it's a direct reference to Dogma, right? That Matt Damon of all people was playing Loki.
I would guess. I think personally, the Sam Neill thing gets me.
Yeah, which makes sense because he was in Hunt for the Wilder People. He was the main character. So was the Grandmaster's bodyguard, that woman. So.
And then they get the third Hemsworth brother to play Thor.
Yeah. So, and then of course we do have, Hela really sets up that she's like her own thing. The only thing she has is like Carl Urban for a while, which is embarrassing. I hate Carl Urban in this movie. I hate Scourge so much.
Scourge.
He's where he is the Rhodes of this movie. He is where like every comedic thing he does for me just absolutely fails, unfortunately. Like I said, more and more so with the exception of like Dredd. I'm starting to think maybe I'm just not a Carl Urban fan, come to think of it. But the thing is that I was just telling you last night, it was like how quickly and easily the Warriors 3 are done in. But then there's the whole scene where she just takes out every damn buddy. It's like in any other movie, she would have had like at least a small army helping her do that, and then saying like, I reign now. It is just her by herself. And like I said, with Carl Urban. Ooh. He's not even helpful till the very end when he turns on her.
And he only has the guts to do that after she's pretty much been killed.
But yeah, I mean,
which really makes you wonder, like I was thinking about this last night, like they build Hela up in this movie as being all powerful. She doesn't get beaten by them, she just gets outsmarted. And they find the guy that wants to destroy all of Asgard, which to me is hilarious. That last shot where they're all on the ship watching him, he's destroying this place that's completely empty and he doesn't even know it. And he's still threatening them as he's doing it. But it makes you wonder,
dumbass Hulk trying to stop him.
Like, it makes you wonder, like, what would have happened if they would have just submitted to Hela's rule and Thanos came knocking? I mean, what would that showdown have looked like? It almost makes you wonder, like, would they have been better off just to let her take over because they might still have a place to live?
Yeah, and because it was like they had already been. Not only had they been through tragedy, a terrible tragedy. Like it's really sad when the Asgardians are just watching the destruction. But then it's like, but there's hope because it's like we're gonna go to Earth and we're gonna find a new home. So whether it be they're still sad or they're optimistic, either way, when Thanos' ship arrives, they're so caught off guard. There was like, that's probably why we didn't even see the destruction. Because it was probably very fast.
Yeah.
So
We just cut to, as you like to call Thanos' hype man.
yeah.
But it just makes me wonder, like, it's on that other heel of, like, Ragnarok efficiently becoming meaningless. Like, if they would have just given in and let her rule, and Thanos came knocking, because obviously he had to for the Tesseract and everything else, because Loki took it out of Asgard when he left. If they would have just stayed there, and if they would have just placated her, what would have happened? Would she have been strong enough to stop Thanos? It's a battle that we'll never get to see that I'll always be curious about.
Yeah, and Ragnarok also does something that I alluded to at the beginning, but Ragnarok like really brings it forth. It's obvious for obvious reasons, but specifically when we're bringing the series closer together.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had said, even though we had stuff like Thor and stuff like that, back in the day when Guardians of the Galaxy first came out, it felt so distant from the rest of the series.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it seemed like such a long shot that we were eventually going to get to the point where they were all going to cross over at some point. Like, that's the one that we were talking about, the optimism in regards to how well this was going to play out, unlike universes are getting lately.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where I kind of had pessimism, where I was like, are we really going to be able to somehow get the Guardians of the Galaxy into the Avengers? And is that too much? Is that too big?
They literally kind of crash into it.
But that's the thing, is Thor kind of starts to be... Well, obviously Thor started first, but it does kind of feel like there is a bit of a link there. But then by the time Ragnarok comes around, Ragnarok feels like a Guardians of the Galaxy movie.
It does. Especially when you bring in the other planet and Goldblum and all that, it feels like one.
Which is doing the series a favor, because it does feel like those parts are coming together, so it makes perfect sense that after Ragnarok is when Thor and the Guardians actually do come together. I said quite literally.
And it kind of makes it interesting too, because it's like Thor and Hulk aren't in Civil War, but Civil War is developing this side of Infinity War, while Thor is developing this side of Infinity War that's going to come together.
So we'll get more into this later, but I do love the way like Banner's desperately trying to play catch up in Infinity War.
Yeah.
So, is that pretty much Thor?
Yeah, I would say so.
Alright. So what we've decided to do is just go ahead and sort of, like we did Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor together. We're just going to go ahead and do the standalones. There's not really much to be said about Ant-Man and the Wasp. So,
I haven't even seen it yet.
Yeah, and I don't actually own Ant-Man yet, so the four you're about to see here are this, so... So are we just gonna... These we can probably talk about individually, because you can't really just go into them.
They're out of order. Where do you want to start?
Let's go ahead. I was gonna start with Black Panther, but you want to go ahead and start with Hulk?
Sure. Start with Hulk.
Because I was talking about something with Hulk earlier, and I do stand by it even more. Hulk does something. The Incredible Hulk, I know, we gotta separate this from Ang Lee and Eric Bana, but the thing that I really like the Incredible Hulk does that really shows you that this was before everything was getting like super duper long. The Incredible Hulk is under 2 hours. And the thing about that is they trim down a lot to do that. Not only do they put what would typically be the end credit scene just before the credits, but I love the fact that there is an opening title sequence. In all these movies that you see here, only 4 of them have opening title sequences. The Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2, and the Guardians movies. And this can be so beneficial, the Incredible Hulk shows us, because, like I was saying before, everything we see in the Incredible Hulk's opening title sequence, if the Incredible Hulk were made today, that probably would have been the entire first half hour of the movie.
Yeah.
And we cover it all in an opening credit sequence. And that does the movie such a big favor, because it can just get right into it once it starts. Obviously, it's still a little while before we see him change, but it still feels like the movie's moving once we've gotten that out of the way, and he's already fighting this when the movie starts. And I think that's something a lot of these movies could have probably benefited from. Like I was talking about with Thor. Thor could have benefited from something like that. And even stuff like obviously Guardians does it for great as far as like intros go and setting the mood. Iron Man 2 kind of tried by going ahead and getting Whiplash's backstory out of the way. But yeah, I don't think any of them really utilized it as well as Incredible Hulk does in regards to getting the story going. So I really appreciate that. You got anything to say about the Incredible Hulk? I've got more to say about the Incredible Hulk. I just want to pass it on to you.
I don't know. I think the Incredible Hulk is good. I think it's funny that it felt like it wasn't really going to connect until we got William Hurt back out.
Yeah. Like every time we see William Hurt come back, I love it more because it just brings. It feels like everything is here.
It feels like it matters. But he's the only connection, really. Like, we don't really do anything with Liv Tyler. We don't even have the same actor that we had. You said there was one of those one-shots that talked about Emil Blonsky.
Yeah.
But outside of that, like... And I think the Incredible Hulk does its job fine because it gives you that standalone Hulk movie. But also, like, with the way that they do Emil Blonsky, that's really the only way you're going to be able to do a Hulk movie is just to get something as big as him to fight it. And the Avengers movies kind of take care of those.
There's one thing that's been left wide open I'd love to hear more about.
Tim Blake Nelson?
Yes. Who is he supposed to be?
I think he's supposed to be leader, maybe? I couldn't tell you who that is without consulting my book that's all the way over there. Could not tell you.
But
I know he's in the Lego games and he does shit there, but...
There is also the one line in the Avengers when Banner says something like, I accidentally destroyed Harlem or something.
Yeah.
But I do like the way they're using Ross of all people to kind of keep the ball rolling a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's room for Blonsky to come back. I mean, he's just locked up.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, you know, the idea that they've teased letting him out in a one-shot.
Yeah.
And I do love Tim Roth. I loved Blonsky before he even turned into Abomination. I like him more just as Tim Roth. And the whole, like, one of the big moments for me in, like, the early parts of the franchise is Blonsky getting kicked into the tree.
Yeah, because he just walks up with, like, no fear.
And I love that Ross's response to that is just fall back.
Oh, damn it.
Because it's also one of those things where if you don't know what Blonsky's whole story is, you think that's, like, he's been done in. Mm-hmm. Like he was built up, and then that was it. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like if you didn't know, you would be like, I buy that's his end. Mm-hmm. Like, I'll take it. I accept it. But yeah, Incredible Hulk is another one of those ones that's been, like, it's unfortunately been overshadowed. Mm-hmm. Because I think people liked it quite a bit when it came out, mm-hmm. even if they thought maybe it didn't live up to Iron Man or something.
Yeah.
And then of course, you know, people seem to really have taken to Ruffalo and all that, and it just kind of seems like almost this outlier, even though it's certainly still within the story. But
I like the nerdiness of Ruffalo for the character, though.
Yeah.
Like, it's like I couldn't see Edward Norton doing it the same way that he's doing it, and I almost feel like Edward Norton's portrayal wouldn't fit. You know?
Almost like they kind of let Ruffalo sort of have it. And that helps a lot more. Ruffalo has a huge advantage, I think, because he's got much more of a sort of personal quality to being able to do the motion capture.
Yeah.
It's like you can actually see Ruffalo in him.
Mm-hmm.
You can kind of... I noticed when he talks in Ragnarok, you can kind of hear him a little bit, too, if you listen hard enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do still think it kind of has an unfortunately... I can't say a bad rap necessarily, but it's... I think it's, you know, worthy of a place in this franchise. And people just kind of seem to think it's more of a... You know, yeah, we technically have that, but they don't really...
It just kind of feels different.
Yeah. But it does also help that I do love that last scene with Stark. It's like it could have just been Nick Fury. I like the fact that Stark is the one that went to Ross, and that really also makes it, you know, feel like it's home here. And of course, I talk about climaxes being dragged out and all that, where we have like a big climax, and then we have a bunch of epilogue because we got to build up to the other movies. But when Incredible Hulk is over, it's over. Like the Harlem scene happens, he and Abomination fight each other. And then it does the countdown one more time when he says 0 days without an incident. And then we get the Stark scene and it's over. And all that happens very quickly.
Yeah.
It's not dragged out at all. Like they could learn from that. I hate to keep harping on the fact that I don't care for the climaxes in a lot of these movies, but still, I do think that could be a huge benefit to the series if they focused on that a little bit. So, yeah. Is that pretty much it for Hulk?
I'd say that pretty well covers it. The action in Hulk's good. I mean, the end fight's good, and like you said, the tree scene, like where he's at the school, all of that's done really well. But it feels very like. Do you feel like the scene where they kind of go off in the woods, and she's with him, and it's raining, and they're in the cave? Does it feel very like King Kong-ish to you?
I suppose, yeah.
Yeah. Like I've always had that thought. Like I always wondered if that was supposed to be like kind of a reference to like King Kong.
Possibly, it would make sense.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But I mean, it's a fine entry. I mean, I get where it seems like to me, it doesn't feel like it really fits the rest of the movies, but it does fine standing on its own too.
Yeah.
It's a nice little story.
Like I said, very quick. The pacing is really good too. Because
Yeah.
I was talking about how we don't necessarily get quite right away to him changing, but it feels like we get there fast, even though it's like what, half an hour in or 25 minutes or something.
It's long enough that they don't use it as a crutch to dive right into the movie, but we also don't put it off until by that point we're just ready to go home.
There's an urgency throughout the movie, even when he's not Hulk. Before we
Yeah.
see that first change, that makes it flow really nicely.
Yeah, and you have Ty Burrell.
Yes.
Can't ever go wrong with Ty Burrell.
Even if he's only there for like 30 seconds, still.
Mm-hmm.
Any Ty Burrell is good.
Yeah.
So you want to go in chronological order, or you just want to go to Black Panther?
Just slide them on down.
Okay. So, I've already said quite a bit about Black Panther, but do you want to start, or...?
I like Black Panther because it's different.
Yeah, like that's... I mean, okay, the problem with that is that a criticism that... Because obviously with the acclaim that Black Panther got, which was massive, all that money it made, all that praise, people saying it's culturally significant and all that.
Roper saying right here, one of the best superhero movies of the century.
So yeah, people have come out in droves now to say how overrated Black Panther is.
Yeah, you're gonna have that.
Expected, yeah.
Yeah.
And people like to say, and the people that say that often say, I don't see a difference in it in the other Marvel movies. But I can't see it from their perspective, unfortunately. All I can say is I do see a difference. So I assume you're talking about, like, what I really like is just, it kind of has a general sleek appearance to it.
It feels very modern.
Yeah. And it's like with the soundtrack, the way the characters
Which is
speak.
funny because they could have easily taken like a blaxploitation route with it.
Yeah.
I feel like if this would have been made in the 70s, it would have been a blaxploitation movie.
That version that Wesley Snipes wanted to do in the 90s.
Yeah, that'd have been blaxploitation. But this feels very polished, very modern, and very...
And when you see like what it looks like when we're always used to seeing like cities and stuff like that, or whatever we're looking at. But when we see Wakanda, it's like this thing. It's like it's its own Batcave when they go into that like thing, like the secret portal where it's just the trees, but then we go in and it's Wakanda.
Yeah.
It's like it's the Batcave, but it's got a big ass city in it.
And all of the people that live there are in on it.
Yeah. And you got like the amazing looking places like the waterfall where they have the battles, the costume designs, just everything. And then when you go to like South Korea where you got all the lights and shit, everything just looks so cool.
And I think the thing too is when you look at the stuff in Africa and Black Panther, it would be easy to make it look like stereotypical Africa, like communicating in like cliques and stuff like that, but it doesn't feel that way. It feels like it's a distinct culture that they're not making fun of, that they're embracing.
That's why when you saw there were videos online of people coming out of this movie, like in the lobbies of movie theaters were like celebrating that it exists and that it was portrayed in that way, and it was such a celebration of that.
Oh yeah, and there's a I don't know if you heard about this or not. Have you ever heard of the WWE wrestler Titus O'Neil?
Maybe vaguely.
When it came out, he took all of the kids in like less fortunate neighborhoods he was black, so he got a bunch of black kids together, and he was buying out theaters in all these different areas for these kids to go watch this movie for free because he was like, this is the role model kids like this need.
Then there was the whole thing where like there's a ton of videos online of Chadwick Boseman either meeting people or talking about meeting people that say like just how big of a deal this is for them.
Yeah. I mean, who's name another black superhero that's been in a big movie? Blade.
Like, man. But the thing also is, from a movie standpoint, not just that, the way it's told definitely feels, because like I said, the thing about it is origin story. And how, like, when we're getting, like, Spider-Man reboots and stuff like that, everybody was saying the same thing, I'm so tired of origin stories. So we've been putting a rest to that for quite some time. Spider-Man does it, too. Because it's like, and that's what I was talking about with Hulk, too, to where it's like, it's unfortunate for movies like Doctor Strange, where it's like, when you're doing an origin story, it takes up so much time you could be using doing something else. Doctor Strange, it probably makes sense, because if you didn't know all the backstory leading up to him being a superhero, it's like there's going to be a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense.
Doctor Strange, you kind of need it.
You need to learn with him.
Yeah, Spider-Man has been established a couple times, and Black Panther had Civil War to help out, and plus you get the nifty little opening sequence with like the animation that tells you that way. Is that where you were going with that?
Yeah, and it's not long at all. It's like a minute and a half. You got a really cool visual. It doesn't feel like you're getting some history lesson. But the thing is, even so, that's the only backstory we get. And that's all we need, because it tells us in like a minute and a half what another movie that's been like 20 minutes dragging out. Because even in Civil War, it's not, the most you can say is his origin story is when his dad is blown up. But the thing is even in Civil War, he's already the superhero.
It's kind of like kind of like Keaton's Batman in '89.
Yeah,
like when we get started, that's just him.
And then it's like, because we get a history that's only like a minute and a half long with really awesome visuals, so we don't mind, and we can easily remember it. And then we've got that sort of introduction in Civil War. There is so much when Black Panther begins as a standalone movie for this character that we don't have to worry about anymore. It can just go.
Yeah.
Like, it is long since off to the races when Black Panther starts.
We really spend more time learning about Wakanda than him, and how Wakanda does shit.
We get Killmonger's whole backstory with Sterling K. Brown's death and all that. And that's late in the movie, too. But that's the thing, is when it needs backstory to progress something, it's not just, here's all this at the beginning, and then remember all that, and then we're going to go. We learn about it when the best possible time to learn about it is.
Well, not only that, too, but, like, usually, like, you take a movie like that, and eventually, like, somebody doesn't want to do it anymore, or somebody challenges because they think they can do it better. That happens to Black Panther in, like, the first 20 minutes. Somebody's already after his role. And there's already a battle for it.
Yeah, and then there's the whole thing where, like, when you talk about the stakes and stuff like that, and how superheroes are unkillable, which can make the movies boring. But the thing about it is, it's like, when you talk about where the turning point in the movie is, and yes, it does get tired when we think somebody's dead over and over again when they're never dead. But the thing is they do, like, the best thing they could have done to, like, really make a turn and really raise the stakes, they did. Because you have Killmonger show up, and then he fights him, and he's like, I'm gonna kill you. And then Forrest Whitaker steps in and says, like, okay, it was my fault, because I was the one who was there, I betrayed him and all that. Killmonger doesn't pick one or the other. He says, okay, I'll kill you too. Stabs Forrest Whitaker, then throws T'Challa off a waterfall, then becomes king. How much more of a turning point you need? And a lot of people say, this is the same old thing because we know T'Challa's not really dead and all that. But I mean, that's more of a problem with the brand, because, like, what do you want the waterfall to have killed him? Like, he's got to go somewhere so Killmonger can be king for a while, so that he can have his comeback. And a lot of people were saying there's a criticism that T'Challa doesn't have an arc, because he's Black Panther when he gets thrown off the waterfall, he's Black Panther when he comes back. But there is the difference to where it was like, number one, this is probably more of like, they kind of give the edge to Killmonger here. Because you'll notice that Black Panther wins when they have their powers, Killmonger wins when they don't. So Killmonger may actually be like a better warrior, but the thing is he does not stand for what Wakanda stands for. That's the problem. That's why he needs to be taken down, and that's why it's triumphant that somebody that is that in tune with Wakanda and knows what it needs and knows how to lead it comes back from that.
Well, even then, he does kind of arc in the way that he decides that Wakanda's gonna deal with outside places now, because he's like, we're gonna be recognized. We're gonna help people. We're gonna leave our little bubble. So I mean, I would argue that maybe there's not a character arc, but there's an arc in the way he does things.
Yeah.
It forces him to change up how he looks at the way he does things.
And while we're on the topic of the villains,
Which once again plays into Infinity War, because whenever the Avengers come to help, he's just like, yeah, come on in, let's do this. Let's do it. Yeah, he's like, I'm not going to turn you away.
just don't bow to him. They don't do that.
Yeah.
No matter what Rhodes tells you. Fucking Rhodes. Always up to his bullshit.
Picking on fucking
that's
behind Banner.
That's the funniest thing Rhodes did, was getting Banner to bow and then saying, dude, what are you doing? But the thing here is, talking about the villains now, this was another thing where we were always talking about, the villains were starting to get progressively better, because the biggest problems people always have with these movies were the villains were weak.
Mm-hmm.
But then, Ego came in, and a few others. Some people liked what, Ultron was doing and stuff like that. But then we've got Killmonger and Claw. And of course we knew Claw a little bit from Age of Ultron, and he got to, be there, but it was very brief. Like, I almost forgot he was in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he shows up in this...
And it gets to be Andy Serkis without, like... Despite the fact that the Marvel movies have so many special effects, Andy Serkis just gets to be Andy Serkis.
Do you know how good Andy Serkis is in this, and how much Claw really puts into this? Ryan Coogler has officially gone on record saying he regrets killing him off. Like, he wishes he hadn't now. And so, and it's anything from just, not necessarily just, singing What Is Love or anything like that, or running back to his car saying, that was awesome, after the fight in the casino and stuff like that. But he's just so kind of relentless in what he does. Like, Killmonger comes off relentless when we see him. So it's more like, it's actually so crucial to Killmonger just how crucial Claw is. Because we build up that Claw is as big as he is, and then Killmonger's big moment is just killing Claw like it's nothing. And that's when we establish how big Killmonger is. That moment when they're at the museum, and he lets the guy think he's getting away, and then he shoots him in the back. But he's still so fun too. I love the moment when he meets Martin Freeman Ross in the casino. Just the way he's like massaging his shoulder as he talks to him. He's like plugging his mixtape or something. And I believe Martin Freeman's line is, "Please don't make me listen to your music." So he's one of those ones where, like, even though he's funny, that doesn't take away from how threatening and cool he is too. So that's what I really love about him. And once again, he's actually there pretty briefly. But yeah, I love Claw so much.
I like the car chase.
Yes, that's another one of the things where it's like, that's another thing the movie does well that maybe the others aren't quite up to, is the action scenes feel a bit more, like, it doesn't feel like we have, like, the closest thing we probably get to a car chase like that would be the car chase I love so much in The Winter Soldier with Nick Fury. Like I said, just with the setting and the way it's shot and all that, still makes it feel like it's its own big action scene. It feels like sleek in some way that we didn't see before in the series. So, yeah.
And that's another one where, the climax of the movie, you have this other battle going on, but the climax that you focus on is one-on-one with him and Killmonger again.
But even also, the climax kind of has layers to it, like the problem that Martin Freeman runs into, where he's got the hologram in front of him so he can see what's out there, and he's controlling the thing that's out there and fighting. Then he realizes there's something behind that hologram that's trying to come in at him. So he's like, well, I'm under fire here, but I'm going to keep trying to fight down there simultaneously. And there's a lot going on in this climax, so I do really like that. I do agree that the visual effects kind of start to suffer towards the end during the fight, which kind of sucks. But yeah, but still.
Do you think his sister kind of feels like a cue?
Yeah, I think that's intentional, probably. It would have to be.
Yeah.
So.
And I like all the different ways that, like, kind of like Tony Stark, but kind of not how he is able to get into his suit.
Yeah.
Like how it's in the necklace and stuff. It's just neat.
So are we on to Spider-Man?
Yeah, we can move on to Spider-Man.
Alright. What do you... I showed you Spider-Man.
Spider-Man's fun.
Obviously, and once again, I know it's something that's a bit talked about a lot, and some people think it's a bit overblown, but obviously there is this whole thing where Marvel's been trying to seemingly kind of put other genres sort of on the outskirts of the superhero genre when it makes its movies.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you know, the John Hughes influence going into this is pretty apparent.
Yeah.
Even if some people might think it's a little forced, I do. It works. Like, Homecoming is one of those movies where, once again, when I saw it, kind of felt like I did about Ragnarok, where it was like, maybe it's almost a little too light, even though it is about a younger character, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
But every time I watch Homecoming, which has probably been 4 times now, it grows on me more and more.
It feels like the tone fits.
Yeah.
Because of him and how he is. But you still have, like, the adult side coming in with Tony Stark and everything.
And it knows when to get dark. Like, Toombs taking him to Homecoming is, like, one of my favorite scenes.
There's a lot of tension in that scene.
As he, like, slowly figures it out. And he's not...
And you feel bad because at first, like, whenever Toombs first meets him, he's nice to him. Like, he jokes around with him and everything else. And then when he finds out who he is, then it just turns so dark.
And it's sort of like him getting to have, like, obviously he was Batman, but then he gets to have the moment that we thought everybody should have had when they met Batman. To where it's like, he's met Peter for, like, 5 minutes, and he's putting it together already. And it's like how some people think, you know, secret identities shouldn't be, like, that hidden. It's like he was just able to figure it out that quickly.
Yeah.
Which also speaks for his character too, and the way he's just kind of able to do that in general.
He's very smart. He's probably one of the smarter Marvel villains.
And the whole, as I mentioned before, I love the addition that he's able to use the alien technology left over from the Avengers.
Yeah.
To build his stuff. I'm not quite sure what's going on with the timeline. Because the Avengers is 2012, but then this says like 8 years later, I think. But then in Infinity War, Tony says that Avengers was 6 years ago. So I'm not quite sure what's going on with the timeline here, but yeah. I'm sure there's some explanation.
Yeah. But I like there's a lot of fun moments, like when he's learning the suit, the interrogation scene with Donald Glover.
You lost it when he went into interrogation mode. Then instant kill.
Yeah.
But the thing here is, I was actually going to say something about instant kill, and that was, the thing is, actually, this is a whole thing, actually. This goes all the way back to talking about Keaton's character. And I was telling you how much I loved how the Vulture was handled in this, because obviously the Vulture was rumored to be the villain for like a long time. Like, it was going to be like Malkovich when Raimi was doing it or something. And then when it was revealed like, that's who Keaton was going to play in this, when everybody wanted Keaton to play Norman Osborn, and it was like, Vulture just seems so, who cares? But then when we see the way they depicted him, it's like, okay, I get it now, how good this character can be, because he'll bust out the suit at any time he has to.
Plus, I also like that, you know, we could have easily done Venom or Doc Ock or Green Goblin. We got somebody different.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like in the first Amazing Spider-Man when they went with Lizard. It was somebody we hadn't seen yet.
Yeah, and the way they were able to do, and somebody that Raimi was originally going to do, with Dylan Baker that went off, but
poor Dylan Baker. He got Billy D. Williams.
Yeah, but the way he's like able to break out of suit whenever he needs to, like on the ferry, like when, you know, people.
Oh, the ferry scene is so good.
Yeah, people were starting to get kind of bumbling and kind of falling short, so he just says, well, fuck it, I'll get the suit. And then there's the whole thing where he doesn't, weirdly enough, he only, crazy as he is, he only kills one person in this movie, and it's by accident. It's when he kills Logan Marshall Green, because he thinks it's an anti-gravity gun, but it melts him. And then Bokeem Woodbine gets to be the shocker.
If I remember right, he gets pissed, too, that he killed him. He's mad that it was the wrong technology.
So they actually kind of do that, and they're able to make him sympathetic in the very first scene. Because he's just trying to work.
Yeah.
And we don't realize, we know he's got a family, we don't realize who his family is.
I remember right, he got laid off, didn't he?
They basically, like, took him
He was part
off.
of the construction crew. Or, like, the cleaning crew.
And then Tony Stark said, oh, we're going to come in and clean it up.
Yeah.
And then he was bitter because it's like, you're going to pay the people that made the mess to clean up the mess. And I'm here. And then that's about the time he started putting the technology together. Because they were supposed to get the technology back but then they had like some left over. They were like, you know, if there's no accounting for this, we'll work with it for the next 8 years.
You can't really blame them for the route he took.
And the movie moves so quickly. He is in the Vulture suit before we get the Marvel logo. It's the cold open, which is really cool. Once again, they realize, you know, origin stories need to speed their asses up. Once again, Civil War pretty much gave us all we need to know about Peter. He's talking to Ned occasionally about, like, hey, I got bit by a spider, but it's dead now. That's it. That's all we need to know. I like some of Ned's questions, like, do you lay eggs?
I like, we'll get to it with Infinity War, but I like Ned's one thing he does in that. He's like, I need a distraction. We're all gonna die! And that's all it took.
I think I saw somebody's comment somewhere to where it's like, you look at everybody that's in Infinity War, it's like, I think Ned was my favorite cameo.
Because it's so instantaneous when it happens.
But that's the thing, too, is because we've made Toomes sympathetic now, there's the whole thing of, when he gets to the point that he does in the climax, and Peter decides he's going to save him instead of fight him. But the thing is it's not... What a lazier movie would have done is made Peter not want to kill him strictly because he was Liz's dad. He's like, I'm going to save you because I don't want to break Liz's heart or whatever, even though that was going to clearly happen anyway because he's got to go to prison, and she still ended up hurt anyway. But the thing also is that it's that, you know, goodness that we expect in Spider-Man that they really put in the character, because it's not just because of that, it's because he doesn't want anybody to be killed. That's why when he's like, when Karen says, you know, like, instant kill, his first thought is, no, don't kill anybody. Like, he has to like, keep Karen's bloodlust on the down low. So, yeah, so, like I said, I did think he was getting a bit blown out of proportion, a little overrated, when everybody was just fawning all over Tom Holland when Civil War came out, because I thought there was so much more to love about Civil War. But now seeing him in his whole movie, and what little he was able to do in Infinity War, I can get it now.
I also like the scenes in DC. There's a lot of nice scenes in the Homecoming.
Yeah, my initial complaint was that usually the structure is that, you know, there'll be some, you know, little action scenes here and there, then there'll be a big action scene in the middle, and then there'll be the climax. But the thing is usually where movies have a big climax or a big action scene in the middle, this one has two. And I almost felt a little bloated because it's got the Washington Monument scene and the ferry scene, which would usually be just the centerpiece by itself in an individual movie. This has both of them.
I do like the end of the ferry scene, though, whenever he's talked to Tony Stark before and he found out that Tony was just on the phone and he was talking to his suit. And then, like, he's like, well, if you were really here, and Tony steps out of the suit and you're like, oh, he done fucked up.
I love that moment so much. But actually the thing that I don't mind now so much about the fact that it has both those scenes is I'd forgotten how close together those scenes are. Well, they almost go hand in hand pretty much.
Yeah.
So it does kind of still feel like one big centerpiece, but it is one where Peter gets to save the day, and then one where
he gets humbled.
Maybe he's not ready. Yeah.
So they do kind of complement each other in that way, and it brings Tony back into the story.
So it shows, the Washington Monument shows us that he can do it before we get to see him do it, in regards to the climax.
It's like his test run.
Yeah. But yeah, you do also, obviously for the sake of an arc, you have to have that moment where they're kind of pulled back a little bit, so... yeah, was there anything else I had to say about Spider-Man? Oh yeah, there's another character I don't like. I think Michael Chernus is the actor's name. He's the guy that had the time machine in Men in Black 3. He's the one that basically is with Toomes. Like, he has, like when Toomes says, like, remember we used to just play Cowboys and Indians, and he's the guy that says it's Native Americans now. And then it's like, he's supposed to be funny. He's the one that fucks up the anti-gravity gun thing. There's the moment when he, Toomes' phone rings, and it's somebody, crucial, and he answers it, and he's like, Toomes' phone? And it's... I know that's funny, but... And he's like, I
love the way you describe these characters that you hate.
But then he's like, what, Toomes is this big threatening guy.
Just picture Toomes' phone, you're like, fucking hate you.
But then, Toomes is this big threatening villain, and he's like, do not answer my phone, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm a curious person by nature. It's like, I don't like this guy. He's strictly there to be like comedy relief, and he's not succeeding, and he's bringing Toombs' effect down a little bit with his stupid shit. And I just don't appreciate it, quite honestly. I do like the one detail. It happens really quickly if you look. There's one shot from far away, but then there's one shot like of the teacher where we get a decent look at it in the corner. In the classroom, the science classroom, it's like all the famous scientists through history, and the last one on the very end is Banner.
Oh.
I thought I always like that inclusion.
Huh.
To show that like he actually made that mark in history within the universe. And then I like the right after that it cuts to the history class, and in the history class they're discussing the Sokovia Accords.
Yeah.
So I like how it's all kind of combined here, and it's the way we've seen the other movies from this young person's perspective. I think there was a theory out there somewhere where I think it's Iron Man 2 when like something's coming at that little kid in the Iron Man mask, and he like tries to stop it, but then Tony saves him.
Yeah.
There's some theories that that's Peter.
Who?
Peter Parker.
Oh.
I don't think that's ever confirmed. I'm sure there's, a timeline issue, but it's fun to think about, so...
Well, maybe. I mean, if you put the timeline together, it might be.
Yeah.
I don't know. I like the way that Homecoming ends. Like the last scene.
Oh, yeah.
With Marissa Tomei.
How are we doing on time? Okay, so, should we go on to Doctor Strange?
Yeah, we can go Doctor Strange.
Okay. Why don't you start with Doctor Strange?
Oh, because I rewatched it the most recently?
Yeah.
I like Doctor Strange. I feel like it feels like a damn LSD trip for some of it. Like, I think Doctor Strange is very... I think it might be the best shot of all the movies.
Do you think so?
I would put it in contention because it just... The way they have to do the different dimensions, like the mirror dimension and the Inception-like scene that we get with the fight between the Ancient One and Mads Mikkelsen and everything. I just think the movie just looks really nice.
You know what I really love about that scene you're talking about? Was the whole thing where you were talking about how Black Panther feels modern. But what I really like about how modern Doctor Strange feels, not just with references to like Wi-Fi or Doctor Strange saying stuff like, okay, that's a thing, which kind of drives me insane a little bit. But the way it starts, and it feels like we're in like The Last Samurai or something. And it feels like we're in some ancient time somewhere else. And then that whole scene breaks out, and then they walk through the doors, and then it's like today. And it's like just that whole jarring thing. And like, really any time they're in there, that building has a name, and I know the name of it, and it just escaped my head.
The Sanctum Sanctorum.
Yeah. How just any time we're in there, it feels like we're in another era. And then when you see them go outside and we remember where we are, and it's like, I always thought that was a kind of a cool back and forth throughout the movie.
Yeah.
And it kind of shows the whole sort of ancient way that they are, and then the way it clashes now, but also still manages to fit in to present day is really cool.
And I like how, like, Doctor Strange has a nice character arc, too, because he's kind of like Tony in a way, where he's an asshole, but Doctor Strange is really an asshole. Like, he's a huge dick.
I do like, though, that the Ancient One kind of throws that back at him.
Yeah.
Where it's like, the one line that really stands out when I say that is when I think she calls him like Mr. Strange or something. And he's like, it's not Mr. Strange, it's Doctor Strange. And he's like, when he puts the emphasis on Doctor, she's like, oh, well, not really now, are you? Or something like that.
Yeah, it's something like that. It was Tilda Swinton's fun as the Ancient One.
Yeah. And then there's the whole thing of, there's, obviously, we were talking about this is much more, I think Doctor Strange gets a lot more time to shine in Infinity War than he does in his own movie, interestingly enough.
Yeah, he is pretty major in Infinity War.
And his one scene in Ragnarok as well, but, the whole idea that he basically has a sidekick that's part of his costume is just this really...
The cape?
Yeah, it's this thing that you don't really see much. Yeah. And how it's like its own personality, and that's really... I love... Basically,
it kind of... Do you get kind of a carpet from Aladdin vibe with it?
Yeah.
Like, especially when... I think it was when we were watching Infinity War last night, and him and Tony, I think, are arguing. The cape in the background is like reacting, like turning different ways. Like, oh my god!
I think Drax called it a blanket of death.
Yeah.
But I do love the introduction of him wearing it.
Mm-hmm.
When he gets thrown over the stairs, and then it goes after him, and then he just rises.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a perfect intro to like this is him as Doctor Strange. Like this is when he's really Doctor Strange.
Yeah.
Which of course Infinity War points out is funny because everybody has a superhero name, and Doctor Strange is literally just his name.
Yeah. Oh,
but
he's the fake ones.
But it still sounds like wizardy, so he just
Yeah,
stuck
it does.
with it.
It does. But I also like how it's explained that Doctor Strange is that smart, and that's how we're able to buy that he masters what he's doing so quickly. And like how he has to cheat, and like go behind Wong's back to get the stuff that he needs, and how he learns it so quickly. Because I mean, I don't want to say convenient, but it's very helpful to the plot that he's such a quick learner.
Yeah.
Because if he was,
it's the reason the movie falls under 2 hours.
well, not only that, but Infinity War would be only half as long because Thanos would have won about an hour and a half earlier had Doctor Strange not been as good at what he did. Especially against Ebony Maw.
And the thing that also is actually one of those things also where you appreciate just how cohesive the universe has been all this time. Because this was like November 2016 this came out. You go all the way back to April 2014. There's the one really quick line in The Winter Soldier when Sewell names drops Stephen Strange.
Yeah.
And it's like the way it's just all still added up to this point. Once again, even back when The Winter Soldier was happening, it was like, man, Doctor Strange, that seems like so far off right now.
And I like how in Doctor Strange is another one that's kind of like, I can't remember which one we were talking about earlier, but you would think the climax scenes happen in the middle, like when he first captures Mads at the Sanctum Sanctorum and they're fighting those guys and he gets revived at the hospital and everything. But the end, like the actual climax, is more just him outsmarting Dormammu.
Yeah.
Like, because we don't see anything else go down. We just see him up there fucking with Dormammu. And I love when he comes back. I love when Dormammu realizes it. Because he comes back and he starts to say the same thing. And he's like, wait a minute, what's going on? And I like all the different ways he kills him. It's funny.
Yeah. It is also kind of like I was talking about with Civil War, where it's like it's almost like an intentional anti the usual climax for these movies.
Yeah, because after he outsmarts Dormammu and gets back, it's just over.
Speaking of this movie being over, once again, like Tim Blake Nelson, there's a follow-up I really love us to continue on that I haven't heard a damn thing about yet.
Oh, what's his name in the movie? Mordo or something?
I don't remember his name in the movie. I remember it's Chiwetel, though.
Yeah.
Chiwetel basically saying he's going to take out the sorcerers.
Yeah.
When he takes Benjamin Bratt's power away.
Yeah.
Like that's one of those things where it's like that's a pretty big deal to just leave hanging.
Yeah.
It's like what's he doing while Thanos is fucking everything up?
But I mean, I'm sure that's one of those threads we'll pick up after. I don't think we'll ever get the Tim Blake Nelson thread back.
Damn.
I know it really sucks for you because you're such a Tim Blake Nelson fan.
So,
but overall, like, I even feel like I don't even mind Rachel McAdams in this movie because whenever she's around, there's a point.
and they have like nice banter too.
Yeah, like she tries to bring him back when he goes in, as you put it, full fuck my life mode. And then she's the one that has to bring him back because she's the only one that he trusts to do it. And then, but when she's not needed, we don't deal with her. There's no scene of like Mads goes and finds her and Doctor Strange has to get... No, she's just... If she's not important to the story, she's not there.
Crazy how that even... Once again, not to hate on Age of Ultron some more before we even get to it. But it's like, it is kind of crazy to think that that actually happened to Black Widow and didn't happen to Rachel McAdams and Doctor Strange. But yeah, as you were talking about, one of the things that obviously most stands out about Doctor Strange is like the effects.
Yeah.
Just the absolute total insanity of where do these visuals even come, like where does the process even start to
like
visualize
all of his different
this?
worlds. Like I always think of the scene where like the hands growing out of hands and he's just like, ah! Like the way that he yells in it cracks me up.
Yeah, And yeah, the feels like it's Inception inspired scene.
Yeah.
Just all of that.
But it's really cool how it's put together. Like, they built this platform out of, like, buildings and street signs that they all just fight on and everything. I don't know why, but the scene that cracked me up laughing, too, I don't know why, is when they brought the Ancient One into the hospital, and she comes out of her body like he did, is she just takes off. It doesn't say a word, she's just, he's just like, what the hell?
And it is sort of weird to see a character like that, like, be in a hospital. It's kind of like the end of Superman Returns when everybody was trying to put needles in Superman and they were just breaking.
Yeah. And they tried to, like, do the paddles and just, like, shorted everything out.
So,
And I like the idea of the time turner. And I like how that, was it the time turner? No, it was the time turner Harry Potter.
Probably.
The time stone, we'll go with that. But I like how, like, that came into play, like...
The Eye, I think is what it's called.
Okay. The Eye of somebody. Starts with M. Not Agamemnon, that's Brian Cox and Troy.
Where are you right now?
But anyway, I like how it's... I like the way that it's used, but it's not something we play with the whole time.
Yeah.
And Thanos kind of does that too with it. Like, because the whole time we were watching Infinity War, which I know we'll get to, I kept thinking, like, why didn't, after, like, Quill came and fucked everything up and got Thanos' concentration broken, why didn't Doctor Strange just use the Time Stone to turn back time to go back to that moment before and somehow restrain Quill and get the gauntlet off?
Probably because he had probably tried that in one of the 14 million...
Exactly, yeah. Which brings that scene to importance. With these movies, there's not a lot of scenes that are wasted. Everything's picked for a reason. Everything's decided for a reason. But I enjoy Doctor Strange. I think his character has a nice arc. But it's not to the point where he becomes this totally cheesy good guy. Because, I mean, even when you get to Infinity War, he goes back on it. But originally he says, if it's you or the boy or the stone, it's the stone. Like, I'm not playing. I feel like Doctor Strange is Tony Stark without Tony Stark's shenanigans.
Which is why they are kind of like at each other's throats for a little bit.
Yeah, and that's like I was reading trivia last night after I went to bed after watching Infinity War, and they said that they like the scenes with Doctor Strange, Iron Man, and Spider-Man because it kind of feels like Doctor Strange is the adult in the room. And I thought that was very interesting because they said that he's kind of the more mature of them, which is funny because he's the newest to his situation and powers out of them.
Yeah.
But he takes it more as an adult because he takes his role very seriously.
So before we forget, because he's not physically present, should we talk about Ant-Man a little bit?
Yeah. Young Michael Douglas.
Obviously, yeah, wasn't Ant-Man the start of the whole de-aging trend?
Yeah, because I think Ant-Man came before Civil War when they did it with Downey.
They did it again with Kurt Russell. I'm pretty sure they do it with Michelle Pfeiffer. And
I feel like it looks the best with Kurt Russell, to be honest.
Michael Douglas is really great, too.
Yeah, that's true. He's looking very Wall Street.
But the thing about it also is, you talk about the complaints we talked about that people have with Black Panther, where it's like everybody's starting to complain that it all feels the same. Mm-hmm. So it's always interesting to see exactly what they're going to do to make it different. Mm-hmm. And the thing is Ant-Man is about as different as you can get in regards to what we've been doing. Mm-hmm. The whole concept, taking what was so thrilling about Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and making a superhero movie. And the fact that
I never looked at it that way, but you're right.
And the fact that you get Paul Rudd to do it, because when you first hear about all these, superheroes and who's playing them, you probably weren't thinking about Paul Rudd.
No, the closest you get to Paul Rudd's probably Chris Evans. But by the time you get to Paul Rudd, Chris Evans has erased all that and feels legitimate.
And the great thing, though, is that Paul Rudd gets to be the superhero just fine, mm-hmm. fit right in, but not really get away from what he's known for.
Yeah.
Because the character's very funny in a very Paul Rudd way.
Yeah.
But still very much fits in with what he's doing here.
Mm-hmm.
I totally buy that a superhero Paul Rudd would befriend an ant and name it Anthony. Do you know what the ant's name is in Ant-Man and the Wasp?
What?
Antonio Banderas.
I thought you were going to say Anthony too, but that's even better.
Anthony Hopkins would have been too on the nose because of Odin. But
oh man, that would have been a funny in joke. But it probably would have been too meta.
Despite the whole play in Ragnarok, we say that.
Yeah.
But
I don't remember a lot about Ant-Man because it's been a while since I've watched it. But I remember liking it. I like the story with his daughter about how he's just trying to be a good dad.
Bobby Cannavale gets to be the boyfriend that we usually hate, but he's actually a good guy also, and he's the cop also. Which has a lot more...
freaking Neil from the Santa Claus!
Yeah. Which comes even more into play in Ant-Man and the Wasp because Scott's on house arrest for helping Captain America in Civil War.
Yeah.
which I love, by the way. And once again, we kind of go against the... And some people will say, like, yeah, he's still kind of boring and all that. I love Corey Stoll on Ant-Man.
Mm-hmm.
Like, one of the ways you can really tell is how relentless he is with, like, the body counts. Like, first they have, like, the sheep or whatever, or the goat or whatever it is that they tested on, but they don't test for the gravity, and it just splatters everywhere.
Mm-hmm. And
he's just like, whatever. And then he does that again to a dude, and then flushes his ass down the toilet. And that's, like, the least worst thing he's got up his sleeve. He doesn't get to do a lot of those things, but when he's actually in the Yellow Jacket suit and all that, I think he's a great villain.
I like the scene where they fight in the toys.
Yeah, the Thomas the Tank Engine scene.
Yeah.
Which is, like, so much more thrilling than it should have been. And the way, I love the thing that Scott can do when he makes shit grow, too. He did that with the truck in Civil War, and then when he does it with Thomas the Tank Engine in this.
And then in Civil War, he does it to himself. Because his reaction is funny when it's a War Machine that he grabs and he's just like, ah!
Yeah, because Shield says, the little dude's big now, he's big now. He used to do that again in the climax of Ant-Man and the Wasp.
And I love in Infinity War how they were explaining, Banner's like, there's an Ant-Man and a Spider-Man.
And then, yeah, just that whole thing. Another thing that always gets a huge laugh is when he knocks the Yellow Jacket into the bug zapper. And for a split second, you think that's his death. And it's so damn funny, you're almost ready to accept that. But no, the train sequence is actually really cool. Not just it's funny, but it's really cool too. And that's what's great. It's like Paul Rudd as Ant-Man.
Yeah.
It comes together in that train sequence. It's like, it's funny, but it's really cool at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's what they accomplished really well.
I love the constant, when we come back and we see what's really going on.
Like when it crashes.
Yes.
But the thing also, and the daughter's like witnessing all this unknowingly.
Yeah.
But then there's obviously, some people still complain that there's a dark cloud over Ant-Man because people want to know what Edgar Wright would have done. And how different it would have been. But I think even with, maybe a director that's not as, creatively insane and just so passionate as Edgar Wright, I think we got something really good.
Yeah.
So, and something that does feel like they were able to, play with it and not just go by, one person's idea or whatever. Because you could say Kevin Feige pretty much directs all these.
Yeah.
And, like, comes up with the layouts and all that, but you can tell that people do get to kind of do their own thing, especially when you look at stuff like Ant-Man, even if it's not a mind as, beloved as Edgar Wright.
Yeah.
So, yeah. You got anything else on Ant-Man?
No, and I haven't seen Ant-Man and the Wasp, so I can't say anything about it.
There's really not much else. I mean,
is it like a Thor: The Dark World?
Yeah, it's just kind of there, but it's fun. It's probably better than Thor: The Dark World, but yeah. So it's another one like Spider-Man where it's got like sympathetic villains. Like really, like some people are even arguing if like the word villain's a bit too strong for what's her name, Ghost and Lawrence Fishburne. But it's But there is the thing that they're after in Ant-Man and the Wasp is actually really cool, where it's the lab where they make all this shit, but Michael Douglas is able to shrink it down so he can just carry it like luggage, and then Lawrence Fishburne gets a hold of that. So he has the whole lab, and so that's what they've got to get back. It's like that's pretty cool. That's a cool setup. But yeah, it's okay. Like the entire second half of Ant-Man and the Wasp is the climax. Like, the interesting thing that it did was, how I was talking about the structure, where you kind of have the start, then you have the big action scene in the middle, then the climax. It's so long, this action scene. Basically, the middle action scene turns into the climax eventually.
Jeez.
But that's actually really good for pacing, though, so there's that. So, are we on to Guardians of the Galaxy?
Yeah. Move forward.
Alright. Once again, Guardians of the Galaxy kind of gives us this whole thing of, they're much easier to watch and much more entertaining if you're pretty much accepting them as, like Ragnarok we were talking about, basically accepting them as comedies on top of being action and sci-fi before you even go into them. Because it's not just like, we're going to have comedy relief. Like, comedy is like a whole identity of the movie. Movies, too, especially, really. With Gunn really going crazy about how much his soundtracks bring the movie to life. Which, once again, I didn't think was as effective in 1 as I thought it was in 2, because I think 2 used slightly less well-known songs, and I think that kind of made it seem more like they were on their own merits, because if you got just a whole list of popular songs, people are going to associate their love for those songs with the fun they're having with the movie, and it's going to give the movie maybe more credit than it should have. So I wasn't as much of a fan of the soundtrack used in the first movie, but I get why it's there and the significance to Star-Lord as a character, but I thought it was used much better in 2. That's what I'd say about the soundtrack, but do you want to go on? There's more to say, sure. I will say that there are comedy moments that I don't care for. And even though I think I like 2 better than... Actually, I do like 2 better than 1. I know that's a controversial opinion. But, and more people seem to like 2 less the more I hear about it. But, 2 definitely has a lot more moments where the comedy falls flat. Particularly with, like, the Elizabeth Debicki character, where I do get, like... I do like the whole thing about how it's basically, like, when they're going after them and they're, like, in their ships and stuff, it's like everybody's in, like, a video arcade. Like, when there's, like, one guy left, like, they're all standing around cheering him on. And that leads to great moments, like, when they appear. That's a great soundtrack moment, too, at the end, when they just all appear at once for the big finale. Is a really great moment. But then you have stuff like when they're rolling out the carpet for her, and when she appears on the planet, and it's this big moment for this big character, and they have that moment where the carpet gets stuck, and they like have to fuck with it, and it's like that just seems like it's wasting time. That's not very funny. And going on that wasting time not being funny. There are way too many moments, I think, in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies where there's moments where we get way off on something, when we get really something. I get maybe that's their thing, but it just feels like so much dialogue, especially in the second movie, is this really important right now, or we don't have time for this, guys? And that can get to be much. And it's like, okay, get fucking moving, please. This movie's 2 hours and 15 minutes.
What about Drax?
Yeah, a lot of people don't like the nipples thing. I understand that, and if I had my way, I'd probably take the nipple thing out. But I'd be lying if I didn't say it makes me laugh.
I just mean like the other stuff he does. Like, I think it's funny that on the surface, Drax looks like he should be the most uninteresting character, and he's probably the one that gets the most laughs.
Yeah, it's really unexpected when you go into the first movie for the first time, not being aware of his character and learning the way that he is. The whole nothing goes over my head. My reflex is too fast and I would catch it. The first time you hear that, it's hysterical. Well, it is every time, but I mean, there's always something about the first time, especially with movies like this, where those jokes just really, really hit. Before I go into what I'm about to say, do you have any...
I just think the Guardians movies are I just think they're fun. Like, you put them in, they look nice.
Yeah, the colors are insane.
Yeah.
Like, that was one of the big things where it's like, you kind of... A lot of the things that, criticisms that this universe faces is like, oh, you know, the aesthetic is too bland, they all look the same, or all that, or whatever. And then this just feels like it's just blasting at you. And you can kind of see that with Doctor Strange falling in between them. And with Doctor Strange, you kind of get a much more visual vibe, and then following Guardians 2 with Ragnarok, and it's like we finally kind of found that groove a little bit.
Yeah.
And then the fact that they carry over into Infinity War helps, too, so...
I like the villains in these movies, too.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like in the first one, I feel like Ronan's like a real big threat, like with his hammer and everything. And when he shows up, you get this sense of like impending doom.
That's really interesting to hear you say, because he's like one of the ones that gets the most flack for not being an effective villain. But I'm kind of with you where it's not like, it's like, especially his intro.
What's really cool too that I read in the trivia for this movie is apparently his ship was designed, like the inside where it looks dark and bleak, it was designed to resemble a mausoleum.
Yeah.
Which is kind of creepy.
But the great thing about that too is that I think something that's really not going to help his cause is Infinity War, because Thanos' presence is clear in Guardians. That's when Brolin started playing him, was the first Guardians, and we know what Thanos is capable of now, even though we only see him like floating in his throne once. But it's like after Infinity War, and you know that Thanos is very much there and watching over what Ronan does. It's like, when you watch it back after Infinity War, it's like Ronan does seem like he's just being an errand boy, more or less. And he does seem like just almost like a side character. It's like he just happened to...
It's almost like you could have saved him from Infinity War as part of that group that went with Ebony Maw.
I was gonna say, he could have been like in Ebony Maw's role, basically.
Yeah. But then we wouldn't have the Squidward line.
So...
And I like the characters in Guardians. I think the characters are a lot of fun. Like, you have, like in the second one, you have like Mantis.
And there's the whole team aspect to it too, to where it's like, with all the other movies, everybody's like kind of standalone, and it's like you just really wait for the team up movie, and then the Avengers happens and all that, and then finally we get there. But it feels like we get that instantly with something like Guardians. We instantly get that feel of all these different personalities with all these different things that they do.
Once we're done with the prison scene in the first one, they're a team the rest of the way.
Yeah. And they're such different characters coming from such different places that handle things in such different ways. And it's just all going on so smoothly when we just met them. And it's crazy how fast it works and wins us over, even if we're not familiar with the characters, which most people, I don't believe, were before this.
No, I didn't know anything about them before the first one came out. I knew nothing. And even in my Marvel book that I have, there's not much on them at all. They're very, from what I understand, from what a friend of mine was telling me that's more into Marvel than I am, they're very obscure characters. Like, it's a very obscure story.
Yeah, it's crazy to see just how big they are now.
Yeah, and I remember when everything came out, and like all these people were making fun of DC because they kind of backed off a Wonder Woman movie, and they were like, DC won't make a Wonder Woman movie, but Marvel just gave a raccoon a rocket launcher. And it's gonna work. Like,
and he's probably my, like, originally when we were going to do the setup, we were going to split this up into categories. We were going to do top 5 heroes. Rocket would have been my second one after Iron Man. Because there's just, not only is it just the personality or the fact that he's a talking raccoon, but Bradley Cooper plays perfectly. It's to my understanding that Bradley Cooper was trying to do like Pesci in Goodfellas when he was doing his voice. But just the way, and his obviously his animation is fantastic with Sean Gunn doing the motion capture. But some of the detail, even if it's small or meaningless, like in the first movie when he's like sleeping and he sits up and like from where he was laying down, like half the fur on his face is matted down. Or the thing that kills me every time when he gets really bent out of shape and drunk because he's tired of everybody like calling him out for being like a vermin and stuff like that. And when he's like starting to cry, you can see his lip quiver while he's pointing a gun at people. And it just makes him so sympathetic. And he gets more sympathetic as he goes on, especially when we see what happens to Yondu after they found a connection. And basically he's like, oh my god, we're the same person kind of thing. He's had to watch Groot die twice now.
Yeah.
So, there was
What's your thoughts on Groot?
It's kind of incredible how popular they've made, not just a character, but 3 words.
Yeah.
And the way Vin Diesel was able to put a different inflection every single time he says it.
And the fact that it's been him through now all 3 phases. From adult Groot to baby Groot.
He claims that there's no post-production work in his baby Groot voice. I don't know that I believe that. So,
Baby Groot is one of those things that when I first saw it in the previews and stuff, I thought would get annoying, but I really enjoy Baby Groot.
Yeah, I really love the opening credit sequence of Volume 2.
Yeah. Like, when we were talking about doing, like, opening scenes and stuff like that, that would have been at my top.
Because a lot of people were afraid he was going to be treated like the Minions.
Yeah.
Where he was going to be one thing that people liked, so in the second one they were going to just...
I do love how he just randomly gets pissed at Drax and just punches his arm with no effect.
Yeah.
And he, like, yells at him. That cracks me up. Because he does it there. I think he does it later in the ship after they've crashed. I think he does it then, too. And then I think he does it again at the end. I think. And it's just funny that he just decides, I'm going to beat up on Drax, even though it's not going to do anything.
And then there are those moments where it has, like some of the comedy can just be, like, really absurd to the point to where it's like, even if it's too much, I'm kind of okay with it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Like, in Volume 2, why do we need to know that Groot hates hats? But that somehow, some way comes up that Groot hates hats.
I love when Baby Groot brings back the toe. And they're just like,
Let's just pretend this didn't happen.
Yeah.
So talking about the Guardians, a Guardian we haven't brought up yet, I kind of did a complete 180.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is almost the level of the 180 I did on Emily Blunt. That's Nebula.
Oh, yeah?
When I went into Guardians of the Galaxy, I thought Karen Gillan was one of the worst actresses working in Hollywood. And I hated and I hated Nebula's character. Like, when she was in Oculus, I was like, this is one of the worst performances I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
But then what they did with her character in 2 is just something that won me over in such a really big way, where surely it started with her giving her backstory, where we don't know why she looks like that until she explains it to Gamora after she's tried to kill her in Volume 2, where she says that the whole thing about her and Gamora were basically pitted against each other by Thanos, and because she kept getting beat by Gamora, Thanos was trying to make her stronger by replacing her body parts with machines until she's barely herself anymore.
Yeah.
It's this really tragic thing. Even the running jokes like, it's not ripe yet. And there's just something about her that I'm so won over by this character now, just based on how she was handled in 2, to the point that, you know, I saw her again in 1, and it was like, yeah, okay, because I know where the character's going now. But I watched Oculus again, and it was like, why did I think she was bad in this again? It's like, she didn't just win me over with Nebula, she won me over with her whole career up to this point, because of how they treated Nebula in 2, and it just makes, I just love the character now, and it makes sense.
Yeah.
And just how vengeful she is towards, like, everybody, and how much that makes sense.
Yeah. I think one of my favorite character arcs out of all the movies in this universe is Yondu.
Yeah, he was a big part, I think, of why I loved Volume 2. Like, I was really hating on the comedy in Volume 2 just now, but Volume 2 is, like, a movie I really like a lot. And a lot of that was what Michael Rooker was able to bring to it.
Yeah.
And then there's, because obviously he gets 2 cool arrow scenes. Like, everybody loves the arrow scene in 1 when he just knocks all the dudes out simultaneously, and Gunn was like, how can we make that bigger and better? He found a way, for sure. I even love, like, that brief second when we see the arrow just in the dark, and it's just the red line. And then, of course, you know, his connection to Rocket and all that really humanizes him, and we really get to see him. Because in the first movie, he almost comes off like he's, like, kind of a side antagonist. And then we realize that he's, like, a big reason Star-Lord is the way that he is.
Yeah, and I like his arc with that with Star-Lord. It didn't feel cheap. It just seemed like both of them coming to that realization together.
Yeah.
Like, and it kind of, it didn't cheapen it by, like, because it could have been something they easily could have just thrown in there and it would have been extremely corny and cheesy and could have ruined the whole thing.
But it was also made even stronger by what Ego turned out to be, and realizing just how much of a... Surely there was obviously negative sides to the way Yondu raised him, but he had much more than he could have with Yondu.
Yeah, and Yondu even says at one point, and he's like, I saw what he was doing to all those kids, and I was like, no, I don't want that.
And it was also one of those first instances where, like, it was an instance pre-Infinity War where people thought that a crucial character actually could be killed off and not brought back.
Yeah.
Like, it was a real starting point emotionally for the series in that regard.
Yeah. And his funeral scene's nice, too. Where, like, he gets
Because it's always a big moment it makes the moment even bigger at the beginning when Stallone tells him he will never have a Ravager funeral, and when we know what's coming, just makes that scene even more powerful.
Yeah, and the fact that not only Stallone is there, but Stallone like heads it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like the Guardians movies. I think they're fun, and I think it's a concept that I think 90 times out of 100 wouldn't work.
Yeah.
It would fall flat. It would become a cult classic.
But in one of those cases of like, it would be one of those cult classics that's actually a shitty movie that people...
Like Plant 9.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's not. It's fun, and it connects, and the characters are fun, and it's also those kind of movies, too, where every time I go back and rewatch, I notice something different I didn't catch before. And it either cracks me up, or it makes me think, oh, that's neat.
All right, are we ready?
Yeah.
All right. So, in regards to the Avengers, obviously we're also going to talk about Infinity War, but clearly, at this point in time, we can only have 2 physical copies of. So, what, do you want to start? Or...
You start.
All right. Well, first off, I remember... Okay, actually, I want to talk about the first thing that's, I guess, an unfortunate criticism, even though it's a compliment. This is complicated. Because it's when you go back and you watch The Avengers, you remember how big it was, how amped we were for it. Like, the day we went to see The Avengers, like, that whole day is a day I still remember so vividly. All the stuff that came before it and after it. Just that whole day was like a holiday.
You mean the whole feeling of who the fuck is that when Thanos was revealed at the end of credits? Everybody's like, who's that?
But,
and now look at him.
But it felt so huge and so satisfying that they managed to pull it off, and Whedon was able to bring all these characters together, have them do all this dialogue, to where we got to see like how Tony would interact with Cap, or how he'd interact with Thor, how everybody would interact with how Loki's going to interact with everybody. The ragdoll scene everybody was talking about.
But then you also had that fear of how are they going to fit all these people in, and we were questioning that at the first Avengers, and that's like half the characters we have now.
I was going to say, that's the point, is that it's actually almost doesn't have that power anymore. Because when you go back, it's insane. Like I said, though, it's hard to say this is a criticism because it just speaks to the accomplishment that this series is. When you go back and watch this Avengers now, it feels so small. Which is absolutely insane.
Yeah.
Because this was like the biggest of the big when it came out.
When it came out, this was groundbreaking. This was game-changing.
That shot, that rotating shot, still has the power that it does, still feels as big as it does.
Do you feel like...
God, it feels like there's a third of them there.
Yeah, but do you feel like that particular shot, like, whenever, like, let's say 50 years down the road, they're going back and looking at classic film moments, I wouldn't be surprised if that was featured.
Not only that, this movie's littered with those. I'd put that just as much with that. I'd put the shot when they're like, we're not done yet. After Iron Man has blown up the ship and all that and closed the wormhole and all that. When they say we're not done yet, we think there's going to be a whole other climax where they fight Loki. And Loki just kind of sits up and they're just already there. Just ready to take him. Just that point of view shot from Loki of all of them, I think is just as crucial as the rotating shot.
Yeah.
And like I said, the ragdolling in itself made instant history. They're still joking about it in Ragnarok.
Yeah.
Now you know how it feels.
That's not something we talked about enough when we were talking about Ragnarok. I like the him and Hulk fight.
Yeah. But that's also what happened. Like the whole thing. A lot of people had questions of why Hulk is hiding in Infinity War. And it's I guess the
Infinity War or Ragnarok?
Infinity War.
Oh, okay.
But the thing was, why he won't come out.
Oh, I thought it was just because Thanos beat him so bad at the beginning that he's afraid.
Yeah, I've heard afraid, and I've also heard humiliated.
Yeah.
Because he's obviously just used to tearing everything apart. He thought he could do that at the end of during Ragnarok. And then even when he was fighting Thor got the upper hand, but still the Grandmaster made Hulk win.
It's
so
like
Hulk,
his confidence is shaken.
Yeah, Hulk doesn't lose,
Mm-hmm.
and then he gets his ass beat, and so that's kind of it's something once again that's been building to this.
Mm-hmm.
He's supposed to be the unstoppable one,
And it's not only that, Thanos didn't even need a Power Stone to beat him. It was just a straight one-on-one fight, and Hulk lost and lost bad. Like Hulk, like it got to the point where Hulk thought he had the upper hand, and Ebony Maw was like, "It's cool." Like he didn't even think anything of it. He was like, "We see this shit every day."
And I do love that. What the one place that this movie could have fallen was if they had an underwhelming villain.
Mm-hmm.
And Loki was pretty much the perfect start.
Yeah.
With not just what he's capable of and what he can do, but just his personality. Like he has the arrogance to think that he can do this.
I think Loki is probably the strongest villain outside of Thanos.
Yeah, weirdly enough, I know Thanos has like this huge thing out of where like because of his motive, a lot of people really took to him as a villain and just everything that he did and was capable of.
Mm-hmm.
But if we had done a top 5 villains, on top of what he's capable of, but just with his personality alone, my number 1 probably would have been Loki.
Yeah.
Like even the at the beginning when they're trying to figure out what it is, and it's like. So you think you can do this because you're like above humans, and it's like they're basically trying to talk him down. It's like you think you're this, don't you? And his response is like, well, yes.
Mm-hmm.
My personal favorite also is his interaction with throughout this the first movie is the interactions that Coulson has with them.
Yeah.
Because obviously he's had interactions with Thor and Tony and all that. Like and with Thor, they're talking about like the build snipes, that whole segment. But then there is when Loki is gonna push the button and do the whole thing, and Coulson has the gun just before he's killed.
Mm-hmm.
It's the fact that we've seen what Loki's capable of, and he's doing his big break right now as we speak, and he's outsmarted everybody. All this big stuff, we know what's gonna happen. And Coulson says to him, "Move away, please."
It's one of those things where like. After, like, at first I was like, man, I miss Coulson in these movies, but now it's like, he would get so lost in the shuffle.
Yeah.
It would be a disservice to him to bring him back in now.
It's like the foresight of this is why Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. exists or something.
Yeah. It's like, oh, you liked Coulson? Here you go. Have a whole show around Coulson, where shit happens to Coulson. And shit does happen. And I haven't watched, I don't think since season 4, but he's like missing an arm and shit. Like, I don't know what the hell. But, like, and Coulson's so fun in the first one, but I feel like the end of the first one was a good place for him to go because at that point he just becomes obsolete.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing he could do. Like, Coulson against Thanos, Coulson would just be disintegrated. Like, that would be it. There's nothing he couldn't pull his move away, please.
But then he's got those moments where like he calls up Black Widow and just gets to listen to her beat ass before he gives her the mission.
Yeah.
There is something about Scarlett Johansson in this. There's stuff I really like about Black Widow, but there's one thing that's not necessarily anybody's fault that just kind of distracts me a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you can really tell. I know it's like, okay, hear me out. It's how when you can tell her stunt double is being used.
Mm.
Because there's obviously going to be that breaking up, but like there's still just a closeness that the actors have really found with their characters, like the fact that Ruffalo gets to do the mocap and all that. And it's like, it's just, the editing is so seamless and it just works so well and it's so well put together that whenever we see Tony outside of the Iron Man suit or when we get to see him inside it with just his face and the lights and all that, there's no real distance between the audience and just seeing Tony as the guy outside the suit itself when it's flying around or doing whatever, and those shots of just his face inside. Mm-hmm. There's just kind of a seamlessness that we accept that all of this is Tony.
Yeah.
But it's like just the way her scenes are cut and her fight scenes are cut, and the way her hair is so conveniently long that it always covers her face when she's flipping around. Mm-hmm. There just feels like there's such a distance between what Scarlett Johansson brings and what Black Widow is supposed to be in regards to action. But that's not to say that there's not still plenty of ways where it is handled well. One scene I really love is when she outsmarts Loki into revealing his plan about how he's going to use Hulk.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big moment for her. And the scene where, like, the thing, she's like, they're basically talking, and then she's like, well, okay, I'm going to go into battle now. And that thing flies over, and she just jumps and grabs onto it and flies off. She's got plenty of badass moments. I'm not trying to say this takes away from it, but I do think maybe the editing isn't doing her as much of a favor, and maybe we could see her face a little more, and she wouldn't feel as distant. Because, like I said, for some reason, it's not working as well as, say, we just accept that Robert Downey Jr. is in that CGI suit flying around so easily. Like I said, that maybe that's a technical or an editing problem or something, but yeah. So, yeah.
I know you hate Hill.
And?
I thought you were going to start ragging on her.
I just think Kobe Smulders is a terrible actress.
Oh, okay.
That's the problem, really. I do like, she has one line that I like. And that's when they're in the, like, control room, and he's trying to figure out what all's going on. And they're like, how does Fury look at all these? He turns.
As far as Age of Ultron, I think Ultron's just an okay adversary. I really like James Spader as Ultron.
Yeah, it's really conflicting.
Because James Spader has, like, a creepy voice.
Yeah, it's one of those, but it's also sophisticated.
It is. That's why, on The Office, I like Robert California. Season 8's not great, but I like his character just because of what James Spader brings to it.
I do like, we were talking about how all the jokes and stuff like that, but there is one joke in the first Avengers movie. I am coming right back to Age of Ultron, but I did want to get out that there was one joke that I think is really good in the first Avengers movie. Because when you first hear it, it's kind of like, that's kind of funny, but okay, you didn't need to drag the joke out that much. It's when Tony walks in and he's looking at all the people working on all the screens and all that, and he's like, this person's not doing anything, that guy's playing Galaga. And then, like, the whole scene plays out, and then the punctuation to the scene is that guy, like, make sure everybody's watching them playing Galaga again. And it's like, that just seems like a throwaway joke until you realize that guy playing Galaga is foreshadowing to the climax. Because that's... Galaga is pretty much what the climax is.
Yeah, that's true.
I always thought, like, that seemingly throwaway joke is like a whole thing saying this is what it's going to come to. Is really interesting. And something that you don't see coming.
It's a movie series that's, like, filled with little in-jokes and little pokes and little different things. Like, did you notice that? That'll come back.
Another thing I wanted to mention real quick before we move on to Age of Ultron was Stark and Banner in Avengers. I just really like the way we kind of see their, like they have a friendship that goes throughout the series.
I don't know. Do you think it's a friendship or more of like a mutual respect because of the fields they're in?
Well, they kind of... Well, I don't think... I'm trying to remember. Apart from Rhodes, Tony doesn't really seem to be all that much about friendships. So... doesn't play well with others, all that kind of thing. Yeah. But then there is the way they bond through science speak, though. Just the way they like drive off together and all that. So yeah. But in regards to Age of Ultron, though,
it's funny that I don't know if this is really movie related or just comics related, but I like that the contrast between the two of them too is that Sony has to use his science to get by. And for Banner, his science does him no good. He's just big and strong and destroys everything. Yeah. But you were starting to say?
There's something I have to say about him here, but also here. What is your opinion in general on Hawkeye? Do you think he's underutilized? Like, really underutilized?
Yeah, but at the same time, I feel the same way I feel with Coulson. We're getting to a point where he's not really going to add much.
Yeah, but the great thing about I do think that was a really skillful way to take Hawkeye and Ant-Man out of Infinity War. Was it's like they got families to protect, so they're off doing that. But the thing here,
it does that without making them look weak.
Yeah. But the thing, though, is that I do feel like we should have gotten more... Because Hawkeye is great in the climax of Avengers. Yeah. Just, his exploding arrows left and right. The great moment when Loki catches it thinking he's all that, and then it blows up. I wish we had gotten more of him before he turned. because we got that tease in Thor.
Yeah.
But then it's like he gets turned immediately. But then
he spends like the first hour on the wrong side.
Yeah, if not more. But the thing is, though, is I had forgotten how well he's handled in Age of Ultron. Like, Age of Ultron is really good for Hawkeye. Because he's got his whole backstory with Linda Cardellini and his family require a safe house, and that gives him a whole thing we didn't know about. It's like that's why we don't hear much about him, because he tries to keep everything secretive for safety purposes. But then he gets like he gets to do the pep talk to Scarlet Witch. That's really important, where he's basically saying, like, you know, if you're going to be an Avenger, you got. I'm about to go out there, and if you're going to be an Avenger, you got to go out there too. And it's like this whole sort of almost like it should be the mantra of the Avengers, and it's coming out of Hawkeye to Scarlet Witch on the side of a battle, and it's like, this is kind of a big deal. But then there was more that I was going to say that will come back to me eventually. His the whole way, obviously, you know, Scarlet Witch more than anybody, but because of the way it happens, Hawkeye is kind of where it most lands on. Like, the weight of Quicksilver's death is really heavy on him.
Yeah.
And that's really crucial, too. And then they kind of, like... And they're able to sort of, like, go around, like... Screenwriting basically saved him.
Yeah.
Because of what already happened, because it was the whole... Everybody... The interesting thing about Scarlet Witch is it's really cool that she becomes an Avenger, because she's the one that was, like, able to get to all of them at some point.
Yeah.
And then except for him, but it's like the only reason she didn't get to him was because they thought it would be clever for him to say, "Hey, that happened to me in the first movie, ha ha." And then
I wish that's how he would have said it, especially with the ha ha. It might remind me of when who is it? In Monty Python and the Holy Grail, when John Cleese gets there after the doom, and he's ah.
Oh shit! Oh, I guess we can still talk about it because it's an Infinity War. But I was going to talk about something with Rocket. So I know it's very tragic. There was a lot of, you know, sadness and all that from everybody. He had like the no moment and all that. But I mean, really, we know the character. When Guardians of the Galaxy 3 comes back around and everything tries to do its best to get back to normal, how much is Rocket going to be gloating that he was the only Guardian to survive? You know he's going to gloat about that shit.
Probably.
So, another thing about Age of Ultron, though, is that where I really think it falls short, where I was saying it's like, you know, the weak Avengers movie. The problem is, like, Age of Ultron's probably the biggest offender when it comes to trying way too hard to be funny constantly. Because one of the great scenes in Age of Ultron would be the opening action scene when they're getting Loki's scepter back. There's a lot of great stuff in there. They do another group shot when they all dive forward, which is great. We get another one at the end, another rotating shot that's cool and adds a few more of them, which is great.
Yeah, because at that point you have like Vision and Scarlet Witch in there, and
they keep it up too. I think Quicksilver's still alive by then.
Maybe, yeah.
And then, I think Quicksilver's death is like one of the last things to happen, if I remember correctly. But then, where was I going with this? Oh yeah, but there's just constant jokes in it. You know what I absolutely hate? You know what I hate more than Rhodes' one-liners? The language thing. Like, I think that's taking Steve almost to parody. And I hate that they keep bringing it back. I kind of like the way they have a payoff where doesn't he calls somebody a son of a bitch. He calls Fury a son of a bitch. And Fury says, like, "Oh, do you kiss your mother with that mouth?" He's like, "Is that why we kept doing that lame-ass joke for that payoff?" Because that's just, I didn't care for that. But there's a lot of that in this movie. Like, even the whole party scene, too. I like the idea of making it a challenge between drunk friends to try to pick up Thor's hammer. And the way he, like, panics when Steve, like, nudges it.
Yeah.
But,
which, if anybody was going to do it, it'd be fucking Steve Rogers.
But, yeah. But I thought that really...
And then, like, you have that payoff later where Vision just picks it up and he's like, "Here."
Yeah.
And he's just like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah, because it's like, that's a fun scene in itself, but you don't realize it's like a whole payoff to that moment.
Yeah.
That I really love.
Is that ever really explained why Vision's able to do that? I don't think we've really touched on that. Well, we can't now because the hammer's gone.
and so is he.
Yeah. We'll never know.
Yeah. So,
It's surprising though, as many of these movies as there haven't been that many, like, threads just floating out there.
yeah.
I mean, everything's pretty wrapped up well. Well, I know the stuff that you've dumped on for Age of Ultron. What do you like about it? What are some likes?
Well, obviously there is, like, the whole, it's one of those cases also where the climax almost feels like it might be too big. But, I mean, that is a floating city. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of individual moments in the action scene, not just how big the action scenes can get. Mm-hmm. Like, when Quicksilver tries to grab Thor's hammer. Mm-hmm. It's just little payoffs throughout fight scenes like that really work. Mm-hmm.
What do you think of the Hulkbuster fight?
Yes, that's definitely a high point. That's probably the high point, actually. And that goes right into... What is it? Is it the scene with Claw pretty much goes right into that?
Yeah, because Scarlet Witch leaves that scene because she's like, oh, she realizes Hulk's alone.
Yeah.
And we cut back to Banner, and Banner's just tooling around in the plane, and it's like, oh, shit.
And it is brilliant that when Hulk won't come out, what better thing to put Banner in for Infinity War? Yeah. So, like, he gets to use the weapon that was made to be against him.
Yeah. And then he freaking biffs it.
But then there is, there are, I think the Scarlet Witch stuff I do think works to an extent. It's one of those cases where when I'm actually watching it, I kind of consider it the slow parts of the movie. Mm-hmm. But they make sense when everybody's seeing like the really dark shit and all that. We're getting some Black Widow backstory. Mm-hmm. Steve's having to confront his past and all that, seeing all that shit. Mm-hmm. Tony seeing the Avengers being dead. Yeah. Which may or may not be intentionally. They already had exactly what was going to happen in Infinity War in mind. Which
already factors into his PTSD he was already at.
Which is weird because Steve's the one that says, why couldn't you save us, when Steve's one of the few survivors of the Infinity War. Okay. But yeah, there is... Age of Ultron is one of those movies where I do like it when I'm watching it, but once afterwards is when I'm kind of like, that's... For an Avengers movie, it's pretty weak, but... Mm-hmm. When it first came out, I was all about it, but yeah. And then, of course, you know, like I said, what Spader can add in voice work if the character is a bit underwhelming because he's a bit too... maybe not quite as threatening as well. He only gets into a fight himself, like, every couple of times or so, but when he does do that, we really, really wish there'd been more of it.
I do like the scene where, what are they... Is it Vision that they're transporting? And Scarlet Witch is on the bike... Or not Scarlet Witch. Black Widow's on the bike. And they're like... She's chasing a semi or something.
Yeah, I think so.
And Ultron's in that scene.
Oh, that's
I just like it. I don't remember I don't remember what was going on. I remember liking the action.
There was also something really nice on the special features, like behind the scenes stuff. Mm-hmm. There's like a moment when they got Ruffalo on the side. You can see like Spader and like his green screen stuff for Ultron, and Ruffalo's like geeking out that he's working with James Spader.
Also, I like the little nugget of trivia too, where like. I think it was Elizabeth Olsen was talking about it, that whenever they were in scenes where James Spader was doing the mocap, he had these huge antennas on his head that they were supposed to look at to represent that he was taller. Yeah. And she said it just looked funny that he had these two antennas coming out of his head. Because he's already an interesting looking dude anyway.
Alright, so what do you have to say about Infinity War?
Infinity War feels like it's kind of taxing. Like, with everything that goes on, because it's just... And it really moves quickly. Like, it just kind of goes from thing to thing to thing, where, like... it starts off, like you told me, like, you were like, it's going to start pretty much right out of the gate.
And the more you see it, the more... Because I've seen it 4 times now after last night, and it gets, like, even quicker.
Huh. And there's just so much... It's the first movie we've had for a while that it feels like there's real stakes.
Yeah.
Like, especially at the end when you realize if they don't figure something out, they're going to have to finish this last battle and half of them are gone. a half of which that really honestly matter too. I also feel like it's a movie too where, like, kind of like the first Avengers, all of the payoff of seeing everybody together is back. It feels like Age of Ultron. It kind of felt that way, but not in the sense that the first Avengers did and this one did.
There's always that sort of that sense of excitement if you were to see it in a theater.
Mm-hmm.
When we've just
I regret that I didn't catch this in a theater.
We've just had the scene in New York and all that, and then it's when Banner goes to call Steve,
Mm-hmm.
and then we hear the music start, the Rubber Band Man start, and then it cuts to space, and it just says space, and everybody immediately knows it's going to be a Guardians of the Galaxy scene, and you can just sense the energy in the theater.
Mm-hmm.
The people were really excited that it's the Guardians now, because I had heard going in, like, I was under the impression that the Guardians weren't going to be, like, a big part of it until Avengers 4. I didn't realize that everybody's, like, equal here.
Yeah.
And the Guardians are
That's
like...
what I had heard, too, is they were going to come about more in Part 4.
But isn't that crazy how crucial they are in the movie?
Not only that, they have probably one of the most significant deaths.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's like, I'm wondering if that was, like, maybe that was an intentional rumor to, like, throw us off.
Maybe.
It had to have been, because there was that's not even close to true.
I don't know. And I feel like everybody's character fits to what you would expect. Doctor Strange is kind of the straight player. He's very to the point.
He's the adult
as we
in the
talked
room.
about before, he's the adult in the room. I think there's a lot of emotion behind the scene where everybody starts drifting away, and Peter runs over to Tony Stark and he's like, I don't want to go, and he's freaked out, and I feel like that's very fitting for his character because it's kind of been rough, but it's been fun to this point, but there's actually, like, for him it could be the end.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way that's done is really powerful, and I like how Tony doesn't really know how to accept it because he doesn't really access that side of himself. He kind of stays distant from everything, but I think he also kind of looks at Peter as like an adopted son.
Yeah.
Like he kind of takes it upon himself to look after him because I think in his mind he feels like I'm the reason he's even here. I'm the reason that any of this stuff's even happening. And I also like how like Thanos has reasons. It's not just I want to take over the world because of this. Like he tries to justify what he's doing.
It's like with the mocap, you don't expect how good Brolin's actual performance is going to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But so much of those, like, little reaction shots from him are in there.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously that's, the visual effects artists as well play a huge part in that.
And I also like how, once again in this movie, Marvel's not afraid to pull the trigger on the bad guy wins this round. They got what they wanted. Like, you would think that, like, at least in this one, since it's in two parts, that Thanos wouldn't have snapped his fingers yet and instigated that power. But we have a whole nother movie to go where we have to deal with him pulling that off.
Yeah, it's like it's going to be interesting to see the aftermath. Like the last post-credit scene of Ant-Man and the Wasp is when there's this joke where he puts his the thing that monitors him because he's on house arrest. He puts it on one of the giant ants, so the ant just sits around and plays drums like he does, so nobody can tell the difference. And it's the last scene because I told you yesterday what the mid-credit scene of Ant-Man and the Wasp was, and the follow-up to that is the ant just in the house by itself playing the drums still, and it's like that emergency scanner is going across the screen, the TV.
Oh, huh.
And it's like actually, even though it's an an ant playing drums like this, it's like really bleak when you hear that sound. It's like I wonder how the next one's gonna like depict the aftermath because that was kind of Kingsman dropped the ball on this already. Because remember what happened at the end of Kingsman, all that stuff that Richard Valentine set off. You don't even get really a glimpse of any long-term damage that caused in the second movie, and that was really disappointing. So I'm really interested to see how they handle that kind of thing, half the universe missing. If we're going to get more scenes like the post-credit scene with Nick Fury and Maria Hill, where it's just chaos in the streets, and apparently a helicopter pilot vanished because it just fell into a building.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny because, like, Infinity War is so big, I honestly, like, as much as we've seen it, I forgot about Nick Fury. And then he popped up, and I was like, oh, shit, he wasn't here. What was he doing?
Because ever since the Winter Soldier, they've been writing him out.
Yeah.
He had a couple of moments in Age of Ultron, but then he was just gone again.
Yeah.
It's always nice to see him, though.
Now he's gone. Like, he went, he
For
got
now.
disintegrated, yeah.
Yeah,
and then you have that little tease of Captain Marvel.
And it's one of those cases where it's like, you want to really go along with it and go like, oh my god, this really is the end. But I mean, you know, we're getting Spider-Man 2, Black Panther 2, Guardians 3. It's like, obviously they're going to fix it, but the question is who's going to stay gone and who's going to come back.
Do you think we still would have that if we hadn't had those other projects announced? If they were like, this is the final Avengers movie, nothing else is happening after this, and that happened? Because I remember there were so many rumors of who was going to die, and like I saw memes here and there, and for some reason the memes were leading me to believe that one of the big deaths was Drax, and I was wrong.
When Tony got stabbed, what were you thinking?
I don't know.
Did you think he was okay, or did your mind go to a dire place?
I thought he would be fine, but in the back of my mind I wasn't sure because I know Downey... there hasn't been an Iron Man movie by itself in... When did 3 come out? 2013? It's been 5 years. And I knew that there was always rumors that he was leaving. I honestly wondered if Chris Evans would survive because I've heard the same thing with him.
Downey seems to keep backing down. Chris Evans has always been talking about like Chris Evans definitely is ready whenever that time comes.
I just wonder if they're going to take the comics timeline or the comics story, and Steve Rogers and Chris Evans will be written off with death, and Captain America will just be taken over by Bucky.
How cool was that moment when Steve was holding off Thanos' fist, and Thanos was like, "Holy shit."
Yeah, it was like Thanos realized, like, this guy is... And I wonder, would it be interesting if that's kind of what tied back to why he could nudge Thor's hammer? Like, it is interesting. I like how, like, as Thanos is going, he... Like, after he fights Tony, he's like, Stark, you've earned my respect.
Yeah.
And then with Steve Rogers, like, that look he gives him, like, how is this guy doing this? And Rogers is just down there like, you're not doing it!
And once again, it's just like one of the ultimate Steve Rogers moments. Of course, when he meets Groot, and Groot says, I am Groot, of course he would say, I am Steve. It's to my understanding also that, I guess James Gunn did a lot of, like, sort of backstage puppeteering in regards to the Guardians in this movie. Because people saw it and they were like, holy shit, they really got the Guardians down. That's my understanding. James Gunn was kind of doing some off-camera stuff, which unfortunately we kind of avoided that elephant in the room. We talked about Guardians of the Galaxy. The whole idea of that may be just his position from now on, if he's lucky, is to just be able to do it, unfortunately, without credit or much credit.
And of course, in this one we get angsty teenager Groot.
Yeah, which was teased to us in Guardians 2.
Yeah. But, like you said, we see Rocket have to deal with losing Groot again. Like, it's a very heavy feeling movie. Like, when you're done, you kind of feel like... honestly, it kind of reminded me of, like, Deathly Hallows Part 2. The way that it's built, because it's just, like, constant darkness. Like, the movie felt very dark. Like, it didn't feel... Like, you could tell from the first scene, it was like, this movie isn't going to be the fun stuff we've been used to seeing. Like, it's real now. Like, there's someone that's come along that's not playing. And I think you also see that, too. I think that's also symbolized when Thanos takes out Loki. It's like, no more games. And Loki was god of games.
The thing I was talking about when I reviewed it was... when he killed Heimdall, my first thought was, okay, you gotta raise the stakes somehow, and it's like to kill a major character in the first scene. Heimdall's decent enough, and then he kills Heimdall and Loki, and it's like, okay, I see what they're doing now.
Yeah. Like you said, like, all of Thor Ragnarok is undone in the first 10 minutes. All of it. Like...
5 minutes, really.
But it's also interesting, too, that Thanos... His best matchup is probably against the Asgardians, but he doesn't respect them. But he shows respect to Stark and to Rogers,
Yeah.
and it's very interesting how he does it.
So is that what you come away from with Infinity War?
Yeah, I'll be interested to see where it goes and how we're gonna address the issues that have been laid out. And I hope, from what you were saying with Kingsman, I hope it doesn't drop the ball like Kingsman did. I want to see Marvel see this through like they've typically done with every other scenario, where there hasn't really been a cheat to get out of it. The only character that really used a situation that they could cheat was Thanos when the Mind Stone was destroyed. And he was like, oh, I'll just rewind it. And Scarlet Witch notices what's going on. She's like, oh, fuck.
Thanos literally pulled a funny games.
Yeah, he did. He really did. But it's interesting that
I also saw some people say how heartbreaking it was for Wanda
mm-hmm.
to have to kill Vision. And then it's like, oh, that's like the worst thing ever. Mm-hmm. Like, I was falling for him. He was that person, and I had to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then she had to watch him be killed all over again.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's funny, well, it's not funny, but, whenever it happens, and Thanos just sits there, and he's like, okay, rewind! Let me try again. But, yeah, I think the movie it lived up to the hype for me. I regret that I didn't see it in the theater. But I'm interested to see where it goes, and I'm interested to see what chances more we're going to take, because we do know we have characters that aren't coming back. I don't think Gamora's coming back. The only way I could see her coming back is if, the Soul Stone got destroyed or something.
Yeah.
And even then, it would be cheap, but at least it would make sense. Because it was established that was the trade. And Red Skull coming back randomly just to bring the first Avenger back into it, they straight up Thunderbolt Rossed his ass. But I guess now we have to reveal our top 5.
Yeah, and I don't think we really have to elaborate much, because I think we've elaborated for the past 3 hours.
Yeah.
Okay, do you want me to go first? I'll just run down the 5 real quick.
Okay. Go ahead.
My number 5, the others I won't really go too much into because it just speaks for itself, but 5 I feel the need to address because it's a movie that I actually said I had some problems with, and actually went through a list of them. And there are movies like The Winter Soldier, for instance, where you think they'd have to be the top 5, but this one in particular is just one that is always, just as soon as I saw it, I just was really won over by it, and I love rewatching it so much, and it's just, yeah, just everything about it, visually and all that stuff, even if it's got some shitty comedy in it. It's got some great emotional stuff, it's got great action scenes, and I just really love it to death. That's Guardians 2. And like I said, I know that's controversial because most people think it's a step down, sometimes significantly from 1. A lot of people do think it did have way too much comedy in it that didn't work. But even despite that, there's just something still that I just unconditionally love about it. So that would be that. 4 would probably be the first Iron Man, which has just kind of always been...
That's what my first 2 are.
Where that just kind of... Not only is it the jumping off point, but just the way we really get to go through starting with, the big-ass prototype, and then when we see him, he's so, even in the scenes where he's kicking ass and he's already red and all that, he still seems so clunky when you look back now because of how smooth his suits are now. And there's just something so charming about that. And then obviously Obadiah Stane I think is a great villain. That's probably my favorite climax in the whole cinematic universe is Iron Man vs. Ironmonger. The picking up the 2 motorcycles thing just gets me every time, even 10 years later. Fantastic.
The effects really hold up for the most part.
Then number 3 would probably be, I'm trying to decide between 2. I'm going to say number 3 would be Civil War. Civil War, as I said, the thing about it though is that for a while, I don't know if I just watched it too much, but after a while, when it first came out, Civil War kind of wore out on me a little bit. I saw it twice in theaters, which isn't that many times, but lately it has been. And like I said, it's more just about the genius of how well it's put together and the way it accomplished everything it needed to while introducing other characters. Insanity. but there are some cases where it's not always as entertaining as it could be. I don't always go back immediately to it and just watch it over and over and over again like I can other things. Like the next movie, which would be number 2. Okay. This is gonna seem a bit weird because we've got 10 years worth of movies here, including Ant-Man and the Wasp. We've got 20, I think, in total. But the thing here is that take out Ant-Man and the Wasp. I think the best 2 are the last 2 we got, which is interesting and really says, like I said, about the progression of the series, which would make my number 2 Black Panther, and like I said, maybe I'm still on the high of it, and like I said, I have seen it 4 times since it came out, but I don't think I think Infinity War has been our peak so far. Not just like everything we talked about, but also just the fact that like it's. Yeah, that it even exists is just an incredible thing. And what else is there to say after everything? So that's what I got. So yours?
So we're doing movies that we think are the best, or movies favorites?
You can just do your favorites. Because if I did like objectively the best, The Winter Soldier would have probably been on mine. I bumped it out for Guardians 2 because I just rewatched the shit out of Guardians 2.
My number 5. And I've been debating it while I was over here. I was originally going to go the same 5-4 as you with Guardians and the original Iron Man, but I've changed it up now.
Go ahead.
Number 5 for me would probably be The Winter Soldier. I like The Winter Soldier. I like the way it progresses. I like the conflict with trying to sort out his feelings with Bucky.
I think it would make most people stop following this.
I think it's a game-changing scene when Cap throws the shield and Bucky just catches it.
Yeah.
It's so cool. It's such like a oh fuck moment. So I really like Winter Soldier. Number 4 is probably Civil War. Civil War it's really fun. It's fun to watch all the characters come together and do what they do. And the way, like you said, that everybody gets their own shot at it. Everybody shines. There's not anybody that's really overshadowed by anything. So I would say Civil War is probably number 4. Number 3... Number 3, I'd probably go with... Probably Guardians 2.
Really?
Yeah, I like the comedy. I think Drax is hilarious. I think it's funny how he keeps calling Mantis ugly. I think the 3rd or 4th time is pushing it, but the first 2 times were funny. I like the... I really like Kurt Russell in that movie. I really like him. And I like the struggle. I think it's a good story arc for Peter, because it's what he's always wanted, but then when he gets it, he realizes that it's not everything that you want it to be, which is kind of a retold story, but for him it works, because he just kept spending the first movie talking about what he didn't have and what he wanted.
And then when he got the stuff he wanted, like playing catch with his dad, for instance, it was really just ego luring him in.
Yeah, it was just ego knowing exactly what to hit on. Number 2, I would probably go with Infinity War. Infinity War was really strong. It's a big player. It feels important. It feels like the movie that you should get with 10 years and 20 movies of build-up.
Yeah.
It feels like where we should be at that point. So I would have to say that would be number 2. And my number 1, and this is why I asked favorites versus quality, to me, number 1 is the original Avengers, and it's just because it takes me back to that time when it felt so big and felt so important. And everything in it, like, you get to see everybody combine for the first time. You get the banter. You get to deal with Loki. You get your first space problem.
It was so surreal at the time.
It was, and I still hang on to that feeling. So, for me, out of all of these movies, the first Avengers is still my favorite to go back and watch, because it was, at the time, it was unlike anything I'd ever seen. To me, going back and watching the first Avengers is finding somebody that's in their like their 40s and 50s, going back and watching something that was a game changer for them, like maybe something like E.T. or Back to the Future or something like that, or Star Wars, yeah. And it's just that feeling. And plus, I love Coulson. But But overall,
Move
it's
away, please.
the original Avengers is number one just because of the feelings that it brought out of me and just the pure awe that still, where we've gone bigger, if this didn't work, we wouldn't be here. So for me, the first Avengers is the favorite.
I think we're finally done.
Mm-hmm.
So there is. I think we surpassed the length of our Batman video.
Probably.
So, yeah, I don't even know. This was as far as I was planning video-wise, so I have no idea what's coming now. But I'll figure it out along the way. I know we're going to do more videos. We want to do the Hannibal franchise. We want to do the Back to the Future trilogy.
X-Men.
Plenty of stuff coming. So,
It's when you and I get together, it's always multiple movies and it's always long videos.
Yeah.
Our shortest one was probably the Indiana Jones video, and it was still like 45 minutes.
Well, we did National Treasure.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that.
So yeah, that's the planned stuff. Whatever the unplanned stuff coming, we'll figure all that out. So until then, do you have anything else to add?
No. Just, are you ready to watch T2 on Blu-ray?
Yes. Which is our next plan right now.
So then tomorrow we have Lebowski through Fathom Events, which should be fun.
20th anniversary screening.
Yeah, so a good weekend, and it's nice to revisit these movies. It's nice that they turned out as well as everybody hoped they would. It's nice that somebody did a gamble like this and succeeded, and we have a version that works. Because as long as there's a version that works, people are going to keep trying, and while that may not be a good thing, if they keep trying, eventually somebody's going to hit on it again. And when it does, it's gonna be great, because this was.
And like I was saying about when we saw the first Avengers movie in 2012, it was such a big deal that I almost remember like every detail of that day, not just seeing the movie. So it's like, not only do we love the movies and revisiting them, but revisiting the memories that go along with them.
And as somebody that essentially studies film, I mean, is there anything that you've come across that even comes close to what these movies have done?
Well, what's funny is some people like to say, no, let's not forget another person who had their own cinematic universe, Kevin Smith.
I thought you were going to maybe bring up Star Wars and how it's gone after all this time. Kevin Smith's a good example, too.
So I think that's about it.
Yep.
So.